September 8th meeting of the Haymarket Planning Commission to order. Roll call, please.
Present. Here.
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 And Commissioner Johnson may or may not show up. He's stuck in Tyson's. We shall see. Everybody in the audience, it's going to be a little bit unusual. It's something we rarely do. But given the issue of the power lines, we thought it would be a good idea, since it's going to impact several things regarding town's land use policies, potentially the comp plan, that we would open this up for citizens' input, because I suspect that at some point in the very near future, we're going to have to pass on a recommendation to council regarding the power lines and the SEC application and all of that sort of thing. Okay, is that a little closer? Is that any better?
Yeah, the speakers. Are you getting it?
Then I'll just talk loudly. Is that any better?
Video?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to solicit some input from the residents to kind of get a sense of what everybody feels about this. I think we're going to work it this way. We're going to allow Dominion to make their presentation first. After that, I'm going to put it up on action. After that, we will allow the citizens to come up and give their input, and then we'll take it from there. If there's no objection, I've got a small PowerPoint I want to do before we get into it, just so you guys have some visuals available. I think might be helpful to you guys as well as to me. So that having been said, we'll turn it over to Dominion.
Okay. Well, first let me apologize. I guess it's kind of tricky to address you all, and I don't want to have my back to...
Don't worry about us. We can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
Well, I will try to be loud, but if you need me to use the microphone, please, somebody just wave a hand or something. But I appreciate the opportunity. We thank you for the invitation to come and share some information. Just so, and I recognize a lot of familiar faces, but I do want to make sure that everybody's kind of starting from the same place, so I do want to cover just a little bit of a recap about why we're proposing the project, and then I'd really like to treat this as a little bit of a status update for the folks that have heard from us at a prior meeting. We did a couple meetings here 2 weeks ago. We've been working hard. We do have some new information to share, some new visuals, some new maps that we'll get into. So I hope that you'll see effort on our part. I do want to emphasize that what we're showing you tonight is no more finished or finalized than what we showed you 2 weeks ago. So this is still a work in progress, and we will continue to listen to your feedback and make adjustments and do additional evaluation to try and ensure that we're arriving at the best possible solution for the project. Okay, so with that caveat, Deborah, thank you.
Do you mind if I just turn off the lights so people can see a little bit easier? Is that better?
Okay. So I'll start, and this slide may look familiar to you. We do have a challenge, as we've talked about in some of the previous meetings, a need that we are attempting to serve in the Haymarket area. And if you've seen this slide before, and I saw a lot of folks had their iPhone cameras out the last time we presented, this slide has changed. I wanted to make sure that we were appropriately emphasizing the fact that there is an existing Dominion customer here in the local area that has specific expansion plans that they've shared with us. And that business obviously is a part of your greater community. The community as a whole, as you all know, has seen significant population growth over the last decade. And with that goes kind of in parallel, but at even a steeper rate, the demand for electricity in this area has grown right along with that population growth, commercial growth, and the addition of real economic development opportunities that translate to revenue for the county and the local area. So the challenge that we are trying to solve is to ensure that the reliable electricity that hopefully you've come to expect from Dominion can continue into the future, and that And so I'll talk a little bit about those facilities and what that means. For us, we're looking at a two-phase solution, again, to ensure that we are meeting the needs in the local area. The first phase of this project is a reinforcement, basically, of our existing distribution system. Now, the distribution lines, these are the low-voltage lines that deliver electricity to homes and businesses. And typically, like right outside of this building, you can see one of our distribution lines that runs along the north side of Washington Street. And I've actually got a couple of pictures that I'll show you how that's going to change in just a minute. But I want to emphasize that is a near-term solution. We've actually started work on that portion of the project at the Gainesville end, and we're building kind of an express feed line that will come right into Haymarket, and I'll show you a picture of what that's going to look like. That is to help ensure that we've got the power that the area is going to need between now and 2017. 2017 is the earliest that we can get a transmission solution, which is the long-term solution, approved and constructed to serve the area through a local substation that we want to put in the local area. And so all of the distribution lines that are serving your area today would then originate at that local Haymarket substation instead of coming all the way from Gainesville. And I'll show you what that looks like on the next slide. Okay, so, and again, some of you may have seen this slide before, but today, this is how the areas in and around Haymarket are served. The red squiggly lines that you see there, those are our distribution lines that originate at our Gainesville substation, which is located off of Falls Ford Road in Gainesville, just off of 234 and Falls Ford Road. And so as you can see, we've got long distribution circuits that span about 6 miles and extend from Gainesville through the Litton Hall area, and obviously serve a lot of businesses and customers up and down 29, and then they head out to the Haymarket area. So what this means for homes and businesses that are at the end of that line is if there's trouble, if there's an outage, if there's some sort of issue that causes the line to go out anywhere between the substation and where you are through that line, obviously that puts you in a vulnerable position, and that's something that we've had a close eye on as the Haymarket area has continued to grow. For us, what that means is it creates a challenge where all of the demand is happening at the end of that line. And you've got a lot of demand in the middle, too, but we don't like to have a lot of customers, a lot of vulnerability out at the end of that line. So by bringing a transmission line directly out to Haymarket, we build a new local substation so we can serve this area from the local substation instead of from Gainesville. And that's the reliability benefit for this area long term. Okay, I promised I would share briefly what the distribution reinforcements will look like. This should be a familiar picture of the Haymarket Baptist Church. And you can see, obviously, the streetscaping project has made a lot of progress since we took this picture. And if Deborah will click one more for me, you'll see the after image. And basically what we're doing there is we're adding an upper deck to those existing distribution lines. So today, if you can go back one, today there's just the 3 phases along that top cross arm, and we're going to add an upper deck that'll have that express line that I mentioned that'll come directly to Haymarket without having the stops along the way. Okay, so this, it occurred to us that it might be helpful to kind of understand more about our planning process and how we develop a project like this. And so you can see we've got the seesaw there, and really what we're trying to show is 2 different perspectives. I mentioned, we've got a need that we're trying to solve On the left side, you can see the State Corporation Commission really considers a specific list of things, and really pretty much in this order: need and electric viability of the solution, the directness of the route, which correlates to the cost of the project, and then environmental impacts. And environmental is sort of a broad category that considers all of the different impacts of proposed infrastructure. On the right-hand side, obviously this is important to the local community as well. However, those priorities, might be a little bit different. Quality of life concerns, home values, viewshed, environment, and then hopefully reliability is on that list somewhere as well. And really, the point of this slide is just to kind of emphasize that it is a balance, and we try to take all of those factors into consideration in coming up with any solution. And obviously, any solution ideally involves feedback from the community that we're trying to serve, and that's part of why we're here tonight. The target schedule, this slide has been modified a bit as well. The top part obviously has already happened, and that part has stayed the same. You can see a number of meetings where we've presented already, and of course we have our open house event coming up Wednesday night, and that format, we did have a lot of questions and input at a meeting a couple of weeks ago. We have decided to keep the format as we have advertised it, as an open house, so folks can come in and take their time and speak with each of our subject matter experts that we'll have there in the room, and spend as much time as they want understanding the materials that we have there. And then, of course, after September 10th, we will continue meeting with groups and organizations as requested. One of the key things that has changed that I want to call your attention to, we are intentionally vague about when we're going to file the application to the SEC, and that is because we want to make sure we've done due diligence, that we have given appropriate consideration to all the feedback we're getting. So if it takes us another 30 days, then we're going to spend that 30 days to make sure we get it right. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to create is the most robust picture of the alternatives that we've looked at, what we've learned from you all, from the localities, from all the different stakeholders that we've met with and gotten input from, so that we can give as much information as possible to the SCC, the State Corporation Commission. They have their own review process. They typically spend about a year examining our application, looking at what we've submitted, and then they do their own research. They have their own independent routing and environmental consultants. They have their own independent engineers, and they look at every detail from the need to the routing. Sometimes they will agree with our routing recommendations. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they make up their own routes based on everything we've submitted in their own research. That SCC process is what we've got outlined on this chart here. It's kind of a flow chart, and the green boxes on this chart are the various opportunities for the public to be involved in this process. And Deborah, if you click that one more time, you'll see this orange oval, again, is to show you where we are in the process right now. So Dominion, we haven't even started drafting that application yet. We're still gathering data, and like I said, we're going to continue to do that. Once we do file the application with the SEC, and we're saying late 2014, and we'll keep modifying that if we need to, so that we can ensure that we have a full package. When we file that application with the SEC, go back, sorry. As you can see from the additional green boxes, there are many opportunities for you to comment directly to the SEC, including the possibility of a local public hearing in addition to the hearing that will be held in Richmond. And we will make sure every step of this process is available and accessible to you on our project website. Okay? So I wanted to just kind of recap at a high level some of the feedback that we've already heard from the different meetings that we've had. A lot of questions about routes, alternatives. What other alternatives are there? Can we see more alternatives? We're going to show you some of those tonight. Overhead compared to underground. Now, the route that we focused on initially, the preliminary route that we brought for discussion was an overhead route. Typically, overhead is the best solution because you have direct access to the wires. If there's a problem, we want to be able to resolve it as quickly as possible. And that's one of many reasons. Operability, cost, all of those are factors. However, as we've discussed in some of the previous meetings, we always include some analysis of underground to at least assess whether or not it's a viable option for any particular project. We will do that same analysis for this project, and we actually have an underground route that we are evaluating, and we can show you that tonight. And there were several issues that we've sort of put under this quality of life umbrella. Noise was one of the things that we talked about in some of the prior meetings. At 230 kV, especially on a humid or moist day, if you're close enough, you can hear like a hum or a buzz. Again, if you're close enough to the lines. And what we shared at previous meetings is that all of our facilities, we ensure that those meet the local ordinances. What I would add to that is there is advanced technology available now that really helps us identify any issues or problems with the line that can contribute to that increased noise. One of the things we talked about in another meeting was Corona, and there are examples. A conductor is basically a bundle of wires, and if one of those wires frays, for example, that can create noise on the line. So we have sophisticated equipment. We patrol the lines regularly, and we have LiDAR and other detective technology that helps us identify those potential issues and correct them much more quickly. EMF and property values. One of the things we talked about at the last meeting, especially as it relates to EMF, electric and magnetic fields, and how those taper off very quickly as you approach the edges of our right-of-way. As we make potential shifts to the right-of-way, the route where this line can go in relationship to the homes, I think will make a big difference for that concern and the property value concern. So I'm kind of eager to get to the maps and talk about what we've been looking at there. Construction impacts. I think one of the key concerns that we've heard from a number of folks are concerns about constructing in or around the wetlands. Forested wetlands, these are environmental features that we pay a lot of attention to, and you'll see some of our evaluation of that on some of the upcoming we do work in wet areas pretty routinely in constructing transmission lines. We have a lot of experience using construction techniques to install these facilities safely and to withstand the ravages of weather over long periods of time. So we can talk more about that if there are additional questions at the end. So one of the things, this is actually something that I promised in one of our past meetings, so I'm excited to have something to show you. And this is obviously a graphic rendering, but these are to scale, and so hopefully this will give you a little bit of a perspective about two of the different structure types that we're looking at. And I think the initial presentation that we showed, we had a simulation of the structure on the far left, which is a single pole. Obviously, it's we call it a double circuit. Monopole because it has one circuit on each side. You've got three arms on either side, and you've got one circuit on the left side of the structure and then a different circuit on the right side of the structure. So you're able to basically have two feeds into that Haymarket substation on a single structure. The structure in the middle, which is a weathered steel structure, we call that an H-frame. And unlike the one on the left has a vertical configuration, so we have a little more flexibility with the width of the right-of-way. The structure in the middle has a horizontal configuration, so that right-of-way width would be set at 120 feet wide. But you can see the advantage is you save about 20 feet in height. And where that really makes a difference is you can see on the right, we've got an example of a typical tree that is native to this area, and the average height for this tree is about 80 feet. So, when you look out the back deck or whatever, you're going to see some variations. Some are going to be smaller than that, some will be a little taller than that, but that gives you an idea of how those different structures will compare to the tree line that you're used to.
Just before you go off this diagram,
Sure.
based on this diagram, these are all to scale, that tree would actually have to be cut down, right? Because it would be viewed as a danger tree. Because if it falls, it's going to be within 10 feet of the lines. So that right-of-way is actually going to be greater.
Excellent point. And yes, we will clear for danger trees. And you've defined it pretty much right on the money.
So the next one should be press the button and the tree goes with the line.
Well, it depends on where the tree is located.
Well, I mean,
Right.
just based on this picture, I think
Yeah.
we can
Right,
write
it
it
appears
up.
that way.
In essence, you're talking about a clear cut of 160 feet as opposed to 120, if you're factoring in the 80.
And that's what I wanted to clarify, because we wouldn't clear cut. We would clear cut, essentially we would clear cut for construction the full 120-foot right-of-way. But danger trees, we would only take the 80-foot tree. So if there are dogwoods or redwoods or olive trees, other trees that are smaller in between there, we're not going to clear the smaller trees just to get to the one danger tree. We're going to leave.
But depending on the type of mature woods that you're going through, you could be taking out trees. You could be clearing up to almost 220 feet, depending on the tree.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of old growth trees that are both very kind of go for, I mean, it's an old growth wooded area. I was actually walking it today myself, and I don't know if you all have actually walked it yet, and I've invited you to come and walk it with us. You'll see that it's not just, one 80-foot tree here, and then, there's a lot of space. It's 80 foot by 100 foot by 80 foot.
We would be clear cut almost all of it.
Yeah.
It's right behind our house, and they're all massive tall trees.
And they're typical grade.
Okay, so I want to talk about that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's a concern that we've heard from everybody. Everybody's kind of envisioning that entire swath of trees between Green Hill Crossing and Sunset Crossing is just going to disappear, and that's not the case. We want to show you some measurements on some of the upcoming slides. We're ready to... Okay. Okay, we have done a number of simulations. We use a firm called TrueScape because they have done very accurate work for us on a number of projects in the past. They've done a lot of work for utilities all across the country. So this is one of several different viewpoints that we're going to be showing. We've got these on big boards that we'll have at the open house on Wednesday night. And of course, all the materials that we're going to make available at the open house Wednesday, we'll also be posting those online. So if there's a conflict or somebody has to work late or whatever, all that same information will be available online, including these simulations. But I wanted to bring one example with us tonight just to kind of show you a sample of what these structures will look like or would look like with the original alignment that we talked about 2 weeks ago, and then I'll talk about some potential changes to that. So here on the top view, and this was taken from Little Thames Drive, which is those quad townhouses that are stacked townhomes that are just before that big open parcel as you're approaching 29.
It's Village Place at the corner of Ken Harpen.
Thank you, Village Place. Yeah. So the top picture is just the actual photograph that we took when we were standing there, and then we took the anticipated line alignment that was created using ballpark, structure span lengths, and so unfortunately that located the structure more or less directly behind that little lamppost that you see there. I've actually removed that lamppost in one of the upcoming simulations so you can see without the lamppost, but this will give you just an idea. The bottom picture, you can see that double circuit monopole in the background, so that would be on the other side of the railroad tracks, which the railroad tracks are pretty close. They're right basically at the end of that row of townhomes. And that's their stormwater management pond, obviously just behind the crepe myrtle. So that's the double circuit monopole, which is about 110 feet tall. Now this one, you can see again the same view at the top. It's the original untouched photo. The bottom image is the shorter H-frame structure. And again, this one I intentionally removed that lamppost so you could get a better view of what that looks like with the trees behind it. Now, what I can't show you tonight, but I hope to be able to show you by Wednesday night at the open house, we've got our TrueScape team working on some additional simulations to show what these lower structures would look like if we move the alignment back further into the woods, so that the line alignment is a little more balanced between the two residential areas, Green Hill Crossing and Sunset Crossing.
How far apart would the monopole and the H-frame, would they be at the same distance apart, or would they be, and how far would that distance be?
Great span length.
And how far away from the tracks would the lines actually be?
I'm glad you asked that. I'm going to show you that. As far as the span length, Chris, and I'm going to defer to our project manager who's with us tonight. Do you have a sense for whether the span length would change with the different structures?
I think the heights that they use are based on a 700-foot span.
Okay.
Of course, depends on longer span lengths you get better all structures.
And then how far back from the tracks would those lines actually be strung?
I'm going to show you. It would vary a little because we don't follow it exactly, so it's going to vary a little. But I'm going to show you frame by frame how that's going to look, okay? And we'll show you the distances, how much tree buffer would remain on either side of that right of way. Do you want to continue taking questions, or can I just?
Yeah.
Real quick, so the lower picture, obviously the tree line is different. So
That's right.
in that, you are taking out the trees for
That-
the,
That's right.
is that correct?
That's right. And that's, I'm glad you asked that because that's part of why I really appreciate this particular firm, because they look at everything. We survey when we're out there taking pictures, so these are about as accurate as you can get, short of actually having the line constructed there. So yes, this does take into account the trees that would have to be removed in that 120-foot wide right-of-way.
That doesn't account for the danger. I mean, have they actually gone out in the woods and surveyed? I mean, it's one thing to say theoretically, here's a 120-foot buffer, but it's
Right.
another thing to say, here's a 120-foot buffer for this particular parcel of land, and what that really means in terms of not really being 120 feet.
Yeah, that's right. And they well, looking down combined with the survey measurements that they took in the field.
That's actually not hard to do. Yeah, they can do that.
So again,
They understand that's private property.
I don't think they're not concerned with who owns the property. They're,
In terms of entry onto the property, there should be.
oh, you mean from where we took the viewpoints?
Yeah. One picture you guys took was from my front yard, which I thought that you were going to be on, but then I have the picture you talked about already. But I'm talking now about the woods. Those are all owned by Somerset Crossing,
Right, right.
so that's private property, which you can't just.
Understood,
enter.
understood. Well, we make every effort to take the viewpoints from roadways. We took one from Somerset Crossing, but we were on the trail that, well,
You were
we were,
initially on the front yard, then you moved to the trail right next to it.
are you Jim Napoli?
I am.
Oh, fine. I hate to make it like
Yes.
so, yeah, and I didn't realize the parking for the tennis courts
Yes.
must be part of your property.
It is. We have an easement that we take to the HOA for export.
That is, yeah, we saw the sign, parking for tennis courts, and we mistakenly assumed that was, we were pretty quick. But where we took the picture, we were standing on that trail between the lake and the deer fence, looking at the tennis courts. So, okay, sorry, we're moving along. Okay, one of the other things that we were asked for in prior meetings is a broader view. Folks said, okay, all you're showing us is this little Haymarket piece, all you're showing us is this one route. Why can't it come from somewhere else? Why can't it come from the north or from the west or from the south? So we wanted to expand the map and be able to show you more of where we actually started our planning process. And so looking at this map, obviously Prince William is the green shaded area there, and you can see the different districts broken out. The black lines that you see there that intersect with those little triangles, those black lines are our existing transmission lines. That is what we call the grid. And each of those little triangles is a substation where we are stepping down power to go out along the distribution lines to the local area. And a lot of those substations either serve Novec directly, or Novec may have a substation that's right next to ours. Again, Novec is one of our biggest customers in this area. So, as you can see from this map, a lot of the development that's taken place so far has really kind of happened along the 95 corridor and in the areas of eastern Prince William County. And unfortunately, right, wrong, or indifferent, we have almost like a series of dead ends. If you look at if you see the word Fauquier, there's a little triangle to the upper left of Fauquier. That's our Warrenton substation. And today, that substation is served by a single line that is effectively a dead end. Up just below the word Loudon, we have a substation right off of Route 15, just after you cross over the Loudon County line. That's called our New Road substation. Again, that's electrically sort of a dead end because there really isn't anything to the west of here until you get out to the Shenandoah area. A lot of those areas in between in northern Fauquier and Culpeper are served by the electric co-ops. So again, you've got long distribution lines going out serving those remote areas that originate right here with the Dominion grid system. So with that in mind, let me show you some of the alternatives that we looked at initially. Ooh, back up. Thank you. And I apologize that the text on here is a little bit tiny, but you can see we looked at a number of scenarios that, just like you all said, came from all of the different directions. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you what we saw when we started looking at the constraints and why some of these solutions before you go, just real quickly, I'll show that the Haymarket line and these arrows that you see, we have distance calculations. That's really a straight line. And we recognize that no infrastructure is really going to get built along a straight line, but just for comparison purposes, a straight line from Gainesville to Haymarket is about 4.5 miles. From our future Wheeler substation, which is right on the Prince William and Fauquier County line coming straight north, which would be along 15 essentially, that's about 4.5 miles, or 8 miles to come south from New Road, or about 10 miles to come from the Warrenton area. So the Gainesville to Haymarket was one of the shortest options, and again, I think on the next page I'll be able to talk to some of the constraints that we saw when we looked at these different scenarios.
Hey, ma'am. Okay, you have a substation plan for here, correct? Is that it runs up 15 and then kind of gray? There's like a gray triangle, correct?
In Fauquier?
Yes.
Yeah, sort of northwest of the letter
So
I.
that's what you call dead end, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a line running from that into the one right, the first one into the green?
Do you want to step up and point at it? That's fine.
I'll point, because I think I know what you're talking about.
Yep.
So this is the Warren.
Yeah. Is there a line running from there, from there to there?
This is Wheeler.
Yep.
It's a great question because we have worked over the last couple of years with both Fauquier and Prince William County to resolve a similar situation. As I mentioned, this is a dead end. And
Right.
we're seeing increased loading here. This is also a dead end. This substation is served today by Novec, but they have the same operational challenges that we're looking at here in the Haymarket area. So we have been actively looking at this area for a solution to this problem, and Gainesville is currently overloaded. And so we've been looking for a solution to solve all three of these problems. That was one of the first options that we looked at, was connecting these 2 points.
Okay.
We thought this would create a loop and alleviate a lot of the
Right.
issues at both ends. Seemed to make sense on paper. Problem is, you've got
What's
a lot
in
of...
between the two?
What a great idea. Thank you. Okay. What we learned when we started getting feedback from the community is there are a lot of battlefields in this area, a lot of protected conservation easements, a lot of scenic landscapes, historic landmarks. The list is long, and even though Fauquier is relatively rural, from most standards, there were just enough homes throughout here to make the home count, the potentially impacted home count, very high. And this obviously would be all new right-of-way, 109 miles of new right-of-way. During this process, we recognized that there was another option to interconnect Wheeler with the Bent Hill Station, which is being constructed now by Novec over here. So we, and I apologize because this is a little bit of a deviation, but we really do make every effort to listen and learn and incorporate the feedback and make sure we really lifting every stone. And this particular project is with the State Corporation Commission. We don't know what's ultimately going to get built. We're going to build what they tell us to build, but we've done our best to give them full information about the constraints in this area. Billy,
I know some staff council threw a little curveball in his name on this board from Greenfield.
Yes, they did.
Which I wrote a letter and complained about, but if you go from Gainesville to Wheeler, why couldn't you come up 15, which has less direct interfaces with residential structure? As a matter of fact, most of the houses are sitting way back. So if you do from Bent Hill to Wheeler, why couldn't you come up 15 with these lines?
Let's look at that. My short answer would be Buckland Mills. There's more to it than that.
Well,
But
he just told me like a couple days ago, he thought serve that area. Now, I know you've got a huge one that wants to work with this. You assumed you shouldn't line up there. Maybe it's not thinking of a 230, of a huge 90-foot tower. But the way you're doing this kind of precludes, like when you show the possible ways for the wires to go through, you don't have a smaller hole like one out here, one line here, one line over. You kind of have reached the 90 and 110 foot level, and you seem to have bypassed using holes that are roughly slightly taller than are out of the side of this building to bring the lines up. And again, like David just thought that could work up there. I mean, go back and talk to him, but he's the one who called my attention what was going on inside the staff, and I wrote a letter explaining that they're interfering with something that you all had already resolved with Prince William and Fauquier, seemingly to the satisfaction of everyone.
Yeah, that's true. I'll be very interested to see how that plays out. And yes, we can certainly follow up with him. But so everybody's on the same page, let's take a look at what that looks like. And I apologize because I'm blocking you all now.
Oh, no, no, you're fine.
Put it forward. Okay, again, I apologize. This is a big map that we've just pasted onto this slide, so I recognize it's pretty hard to read the details. We will have this map full size in our open house, and of course, when we put this online, you'll be able to zoom in and see all the detail and see specifically down here at the bottom in this legend area, we've included descriptions of the different constraints that we've got mapped as layers on this aerial map that you can probably recognize. So here, these purple lines, these are our existing transmission lines. Here's our Loudon substation just over the county line. New Road that we've mentioned. Gainesville is here. Vitt Hill down here. Wheeler over here on the county line. Haymarket, the proposed substation is here. And you can probably see this little red line that runs along here that represents the preliminary route that we started this process with. So one of the things I want to call your attention to, obviously this is Manassas Battlefield here. All kinds of different constraints that we've got layered on here. Wetlands is in the pink, the light pink shading. This area, again, it looks pretty small, but this is 29, this is basically where 29 and 15 come together right here, right at the Fauquier County line. And this is Buckland Mills. There is a large historic district. Some of it is already registered, some of it is eligible, and then some of it is just what they call a study area. But this whole area was used for troop movement and things like that.
Do you realize that all of Haymarket is a historic district from one end to the other?
We have heard that.
You're going to hear it again.
And you know, we certainly recognize it is not just a one-to-one. You know, this resource is more important or less important than this other resources. It's not, you know, homes versus the wetlands. It's a whole host of impacts that we do our best to weigh and measure with as much objectivity as we can. And at the end of the day, all of that gets put into a report that we share with the State Corporation Commission.
I can tell you as a realtor, I can tell you this is going to make a major impact on property value. Major.
I appreciate that. Let's, if we'll indulge me a little bit longer, let's look at the maps and talk about that line alignment that I've been alluding to. And again, we can come back to this if we want to talk more about the constraints and what's where. So looking at all of those constraints, the planning map that we started with, we said, okay, we want to, based on everything we've learned already about this area, we want to focus on this area. We feel like the best opportunity is to go from Gainesville to Haymarket. So we want to focus on this area. Go ahead. And we came up with a number of alternatives. And you all have seen this slide before. We've actually added to this slide. Click one more. So you'll see even more variations and adjustments. Hopefully you can now see two new corridors along the north, that'd be the northeast and the southwest side of 66, and the one that I've kind of alluded to already down here. And again, I'm going to take you frame by frame to show you what this variation down here could look like. And Greg, was there something in particular you wanted me to touch on this with the constraints? Just kind of shows,
How does options line up with balancing the plans?
yeah, again, balancing, there's so many constraints in all of these areas. Yep, a closer up view, again, the different types of constraints. You can see, this is a little bit clearer on this slide, the different types of, actually the constraints are here, and the facilities are indicated here. Okay, go one more. And on this slide, I wanted to point out on the southern side, the alternatives that we looked at on the southern side of 66, these little dots are houses that the right-of-way would actually go over. We would have to displace those homeowners with this
You're
particular.
going to displace us? Do you think we care about 5 houses? You're talking about hundreds of houses. I live up to this railroad track. I am being forced out of my home with your plans as they currently are by next spring. So I don't have to disclose this to a potential buyer. Honest to God, you expect us to feel sorry for 6 houses? Everybody in this room is affected by this. There's a lot more than 6 people in this room. And not to mention that half the homeowners who do abut the railroad tracks aren't even here.
Oh, I understand, and I think we met with a lot of them 2 weeks ago.
I'm sorry to just blurt that out.
No,
I'm sorry.
I
I'm
understand
being
that.
forced out of my house, and I am not happy about it. I'm very upset about it.
I'm going to come back to this because I want to get to the other alignment that we talked about, but that's the chart that I've talked about previously. Okay, this is the part that I've kind of been working up to, and I want to try to help you understand what we're looking at, and then I want to go frame by frame and look at what this would mean. So the original route, the preliminary route that we came with is this red line here, and again, the shaded area represents that 120-foot wide right, and as we discussed, there would be some additional danger tree clearing, more than likely through the mature forested areas. The pink lines that we've added are variations that we are evaluating, and I think this is going to have some additional meaning as we move along. But this again is the Village Place. Again, we took that original photograph from right up here at this intersection, looking straight down at this structure here. So with one of these variations, that structure would move back approximately 100 feet into the woods. And so you can see the right-of-way for this new pink alignment is shaded in pink. And it's a little more faint. I apologize for that, but we wanted to try to distinguish between this right-of-way and the original right-of-way, which would remain wooded.
So let me see if make sure I understand. That pink line from the distance between the pink line and the red line, for example, is about 100 feet.
Actually, it'd be a little bit more than that. It would be a little bit more than that because the red line is centered in this 120-foot right-of-way, and then there's a little bit of a gap, and then this right-of-way is 120 feet. So you've got at least 60 feet and 60 feet. So it's more like 120 feet between the two center lines. But I'd rather not focus on inches because these routes are conceptual, so there could be some adjustment. But this is to provide an example of an alternative that we're evaluating.
Can you use genotype of pole on these alternatives?
Yes. Yes. So let's, Deborah, if we could, let's go ahead and kind of click through. Okay, so this is Rogues Forest.
Rogues Forest.
Thank
That's
you.
my street, that's me. Your little red dot was right on me, right down there. That's
There's-
it, that's me.
Okay.
No, look.
No, you're over here.
Closer to the track.
Aren't you over here? Okay, so, so here's Rogues Forest. And again, this red route was the original proposed right-of-way. And you can see, hopefully you can make out, it's kind of faint and it's hard with the lights, but there's a blue line that runs along here that shows the actual stream bed. And it looks like it's a little off, but what we've done is we've tried to, again, balance the impacts. We want to make sure that we're leaving, with this potential alignment, we would leave, all of this would be wooded. The line would run along the north side of the stream bank through here. And then, again, you've got, and I can't read that, Travis, maybe you can, 204 feet of woods between the edge of the right-of-way and the trail on the Somerset Crossing side. So this is Reno Crossing, this is Somerset Crossing.
So by balancing, you're leaving more of Somerset Crossing land and actually harming the Somerset Crossing residents more because you're bringing it in closer to our home and closer to our path. Now, are you trying to divide Somerset and Green Hill? Because that's not going to work. Or are you being serious with this proposal? I mean, this is ridiculous. You go further deeper into the wetlands and the protected areas where the migratory birds are. For what?
Well,
A little strip of trees isn't going to help them in the winter, nor is it going to help us. 6, 7 months of the year, we're not in full foliage, and you can see the tracks. So you've got to understand that it really rings hollow when you say we have 250 feet of trees. Number one, because we know that's not true, we're going to actually have to go for a power line of trees. And number two, 6, 7 months of the year, we don't have all the full foliage, so we're going to see these big, gaudy, power lines coming through. You have a route down 15, there's already power lines there. There's nothing built there, but what is being built is further back, less intrusive. I don't get it. 66, same thing. They're going to be constructing it and widening it, piggyback off of their construction and get your poles in or put them on the ground. It seems to me you pick the worst possible. You're harming. We have over 520 homes in Somerset Crossing alone. You probably hit at least 1,500 homes, wetlands, bird sanctuary. I mean, everything you could do aside from running over children is making this route. I mean, it's the worst possible.
Honestly,
Is this,
I can understand where you guys are coming from, because what you did is you took the least expensive route. Okay, for this scenario, for this course of action, this isn't going to work. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to spend a little bit more, probably go down, like you said, down 15, or honestly, go right there. Y'all scared me right now. Okay,
is,
you have to go down 15, or you have to go down 66. Those are your only two courses of action at this point. Because honestly, you're going to have pitchforks and torches if you try and go back through there.
is the pink line based on not being able to utilize the railroad right-of-way?
Well, what we heard at some of the previous meetings, a lot of concern about the potential for the future VRE extension, the allowing enough space on the southern side of the rail corridor for that future possibility. And then we also heard from residents, why not move it further back into the woods so we can maintain some of the tree buffer between the railroad and the structures.
Because other residents have said just the opposite.
Let me put something to rest right now. The railroad easement for the expansion, if there's going to double track it for VRE, unfortunately for those who live in Greenville Crossing, the railroad easement lies to the north side of the tracks. It does not lie on the south side. Their expansion easement. So on the north side. Yes, Ken, that means your backyard. That's a discussion for another night.
Okay,
Are there any proposals to bury this in there?
let's go to that.
Now the fun
So we'll
begins.
go to bed. Yep, so we can come back to that. Okay, so, and again, the lines that we're showing are conceptual. We do not have any sort of arrangement. We have had preliminary conversations with VDOT. We're pretty sure they're not going to allow us to co-locate in their right-of-way. So the lines you're seeing there are really representative of what we're looking at on either side of 66. And the original, there we go. The original route is this red line again that would come down and parallel Cat Harpin. Alternatives that we're looking at would be continuing overhead across Cat Harpin and continuing along the southern side of 66. Again, we run into some concerns down here closer to 15 where the existing residential development is built right up to 66.
Those are the like big houses we're talking about.
That's right, the white dots that I showed that we have no sympathy for. Yes.
Any houses that we would cross over, that might,
Yes.
how many more within 60 feet that we can't come down?
That's on the orange line.
I don't know.
The orange line, right there, the south orange line.
Yes,
Okay.
the overhead route. Now, the underground option that we're evaluating would require somewhere along this route, maybe here, maybe somewhere else on this parcel or another parcel, but would require a transition station where we would go from overhead to underground. So that would be kind of like a very small substation, but it would be a fenced-in area that would have some equipment in it, breakers and so forth. But from there, the right-of-way that would be required for underground is more narrow, although, just like any other right-of-way, it would need to be maintained, cleared edge to edge, and that's, Chris, is that 50 feet in width?
So,
With all due respect, it's not our job or responsibility to be concerned with trying to find you all another route. It is our job and responsibility to make sure you do not pass through our community. I don't understand why, it doesn't even matter. All these other route options, that's great, but you need to figure that out, not us.
And ultimately, it's not us either.
so 66, the party that is the flying directed for 66 is the state. Is that it? I mean, not just as easy.
That's oversimplifying it.
But I mean, is that essentially what it is? Is it's the state through VDOT?
They won't allow us on the right of way, we have to perform the right of way.
There's also a federal DOT issue with the right-of-way, potentially.
And then ultimately, the state would have to approve, one of these routes, and they will evaluate, a lot of the same factors that we look at.
Who said VDOT doesn't want to cooperate with you? I mean, this is the time to deal with VDOT because they're widening 66. And there's a whole bunch of construction that you should be able to kick this off at this time. Look, 8 miles outside of San Diego, there is a big set of power cables being put underground along the interstate. This is much shorter, much less intrusive, more secure from terrorists.
we're going to circle back around to that, Delegate Marshall.
Okay. Okay, so.
Believe me.
And I'm going to wrap it up so we can take questions or go back to some of the other materials. So this just shows more of that route as it's continuing. I think we can kind of speak to these with you.
Is this online? Wait, back. Go forward. This is a picture that's way old.
Yes,
Okay, because
Yes.
what you have there,
the base map.
yeah, because
Yes.
because where those really faint lines in, those are now houses.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so
we
if
have
you-
to add to our home count.
Exactly. So needless to say, if you put that line in down 66, how many of those houses are going to have to go?
All of them.
Those are brand new homes.
Those are
too.
brand new homes.
But what about the pink line? I'm not sure I understand. What
So-
about,
Well, we'll get to it, but to get to the
Okay,
top
so
of the
now,
matter.
okay, much like this lady back here, I've been in that home less than 18 months. You're telling me that we just got a loan through USAA for $500,000 that home is now null and void.
I don't think you have to worry about that.
Because that's kind of just came across that way.
Let me,
Yeah.
did she say that the SEC makes the final call?
That's right.
They do.
Okay, so, I hear you guys, and I'm in Greenhill Crossing, but don't get too mad at it.
No, I'm
You're saying the SEC is gonna make the call.
Right.
Is that the only route you have underground?
I'm assuming the pink line is one potentially as well.
Yeah, the pink
And
line.
what kind of say do we have the SEC? I mean, the dog on pony show is fine, but if those, you guys don't make the call, and somebody else is making the call, I'm gonna get up and leave and go ahead and leave, because I don't care less what you have to say, if somebody else is making the shot.
Say they have to make the call.
Well, they have to make the proposals.
They make the proposal. So we can sit back and let them make their proposal and then react, or we can try to be proactive, work with them, or push them to make a better proposal that's more fair to each candidate, and then support them.
Is there any way to take this line, I mean, there's so much commercial on 29, up 15. Is there any way to go through those areas as opposed to affecting homeowners as opposed to the commercial route? I just don't understand that.
We're definitely going to discuss that in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Man, not only that, but you have two schools along that line. I don't think people are going to want their kindergartners going where there's, above ground power lines. I mean, even if it's underground, you've got the new Pace West they just built, you've got Tyler. So in addition to homes, which are going to wipe out that whole row of homes, you've got schools
One
there.
of the questions that we got at the previous meetings was wanting to see these other routes and why perhaps they may not work. And those challenges that you're describing are the constraints that we've been talking about. But we wanted to give everybody the full picture of what kind of challenges we're dealing with pretty much any of these routes.
I understand that, but that's really not an option route then with schools.
Well, and what we don't know yet, and the reason we're looking at the underground alternative along this particular alignment is with underground, we would need less total space for the right-of-way. Is there enough space to be well outside of those private homes, but still outside of the critical area for VDOT? And we're just not going to know that until we're able to survey on the ground. But that's, why we wanted to put that yellow line in there as a conceptual alignment for a potential underground alternative. Oh, the crowd's going wild. Do you want to?
Can I say something to you? We don't know that VDOT won't work with us.
You just said that.
We met with VDOT. They have, several rules. We're trying to work with them to see in there when they want us to go back and see the plan. So these lines were put on here pretty quick. The further one to the south is an overhead right of way. The one closer is the underground right of way. We're trying to find a way to get through there underground if it's possible. So this is a work in progress.
question on that
Sure,
particular
sure.
issue? Because I know there's going to be quite a few questions on that.
Okay.
So rather than circle back to that one, please.
Okay. Let's keep going then with this.
I just want to ask,
That's
are
the
you
last
looking at
slide.
underground options other than the one to the south of 66? Are you looking also north of 66? Or the current proposed route going underground instead of overhead?
Well, the preliminary route that goes through the wetlands,
Correct.
that would have one of the more severe impacts because underground construction is far more invasive. Having a hole every 700 to 900 feet.
So you're not looking at this.
So the short answer is no, we would not be inclined to run underground along the preliminary overhead route.
Okay.
But if you were saying it would be more invasive, but it would only be 50 feet instead of 120.
But you're digging up every inch. And we're talking about a 5-foot wide trench, probably 6 to 10 feet deep.
But that's going to be impacted even if the homeowners aren't right.
Appreciate it.
No, we looked at that as overhead.
Maybe going way back to one of your earlier alternatives, something I'm just not clear on. When you were talking about the southern road, you said it seemed good, it's rural, except there's Buckland Mills. And Buckland Mills was historic, some of it potentially historic. And then this lady said, but all the King Market is historic. You said, oh yeah, we heard that. It seemed rather dismissive. I just wondered why is Buckland Mills, why is that more important to preserve than Haymarket and all this?
I appreciate that. I apologize if my comments sounded dismissive. It did come up in every meeting has so far. So we were definitely aware of Haymarket's historic status, certainly not one over the other. I don't really have any additional slides about the route of 15. Diana, do you want to offer anything additional about what we looked at? We can go back to that constraints slide.
Basically, we really didn't look at Route 15. That had what we considered, we found out in the other project, the hollow ground route. That's historic as well. Lots of them. Right.
So, Mr. Chairman, let me just, and maybe I'm just probably reiterating, but just so we say where we are in the process now, is that we've just been listening to you and others as we've been out to have these meetings. So, we're asked about alternatives that we had before we came to you with our preliminary, and so we shared those a week or two ago, and we were asked to explore other alternatives as well. So we're here tonight to show you what other alternatives that we have come up with. We're not asking you to make a decision. We are asking you to do what many of you are doing tonight, and that is to tell us the constraints, interests that you have in these areas. I think it's good. We believe that it's good to, and we're willing to listen and accept those alternatives and explore them, because then we can put them in the package, very voluminous package that we present to the State Corporation Commission. So we're open to hearing that. We're open to exploring and putting that information in, adding to the constraints and alternatives. So then we can present a package to the State Corporation Commission that explores the views and interests of the community. We will, before we file though, try to present a preferred route. At some point, that is our obligation to the State Corporation to select a preferred route. So as we
It's another one. I think.
South side doesn't work because it has the guy.
We would have new homes, those sight lines.
We can explore it. I need to say, that's not.
We're going to explore that in a couple of
Yeah.
minutes.
I think that helps them put in jeopardy.
That would require two crossings.
I was looking out, there's nothing here within the right of way.
I'm willing to take out, how many, county schools I'm willing to pay off and get rid of, just go with
That's
power
pretty
line.
clear.
It's the bottom line, it's the bottom line for you guys, bottom line for whether my house goes up is because something is humming and buzzing and sticking out.
Yeah.
So, where's balance? I mean, fair down the line, like they said, we'll all pay for it. Spread the cost. There's a lot of money, a lot of influence in the
Give it
community.
another minute.
So,
I do want to move it along.
cost of living here.
It seems like you're really looking overhead, and that impacts a lot more houses than the narrower corridor does when you go underground. I can appreciate, that's what I do for a living, is lay power lines for the Army, and it's more difficult to go underground, but you're affecting a much less piece of area. You're talking about $500 million homes. You add up a dozen or two of those, and I don't see how a couple $1 million is the chump change when it comes to laying power lines and some of these things, right?
And if it was a difference of a couple $1 million, you'd be right.
I think we're going to get heavily into this issue
Okay.
shortly. So I think for purposes of keeping everybody on track and getting all the information out there before everybody starts to, we're going to have plenty of opportunity for questions and responses at the end. So in the interest of trying to get everybody on the same page, I kind of want to move a little bit further down the road so we can get some more information out there and perhaps forestall some questions. But
Okay, and I guess in closing, we've been through the map slides that we brought with us tonight. If you want to go back to that SAC chart, I just want to reiterate, and I know we've touched on this several times, but and this flow chart is available on our website as well. But again, this is the NCC review process. These are the steps that they go through, and again, I would encourage you all to participate and share your comments directly with the SEC. Thank you. Yes, we left that here in our last meeting, and we'll continue to leave it here. Mayor Lee wanted to be sure that these materials are available for everyone whenever anybody wants to stop by. So we'll leave this here. Again, we're here, but there are multiple opportunities for the public to have a voice in this SEC review process. I don't feel like I can overstate that. And we have cards with us tonight. If you want to contact us directly via email or we have a toll-free line. I do have an email distribution list that I'm setting up so that when we add materials like the open house materials to the website, once we get into the SEC process, I will add, the different reports that come out, the different deadlines that will be accessible on the website, and I can add to that distribution list if you'd like to be made aware of those milestones in the process.
I appreciate it. Sherry, we're going to switch things up just a little bit in order to try and forestall some questions. Kind of put some stuff out there that I have a suspicion people are going to ask. I've got 6 rather simple slides. I promise I'm going to take less than 30 seconds a piece. Could you fire that up? Because it might give a little more insight into some of the questions that have been asked of members of the Planning Commission in the last couple of days. If I could have my laser pointer back. Hope everybody bears with me. I'm suffering from the ragweed today. Probably. should appear better once you turn the light out. All right. Who's going to flip through this? Try not to blind anybody with this. One of the questions that a number of residents have asked is, where exactly is this? Is the cut going to be? Is the clear cut going to be? And that's fine. Where is it in relation to the town boundary? Is it within the town? Is it without the town? This may not be of much concern to the Somerset residents, but I know it's. Sorry, ragweed's really bothering me. It may not be that much of a concern to the Somerset residents, but I know it is a concern of the town residents, and that is, where is this cut going to be located, particularly with reference to the town? One of my neighbors, Pat Carney, who I don't see here tonight, actually chalked through the poison ivy and the briars and located one of the town stone markers that delineates the town boundary. He actually plotted it out on a GPS, and it's this little blue dot right there. This isn't to scale, but you can tell this is actually blown up and larger than the scale here, but the entirety of the clear cut is going to actually be within the town boundaries. So if those were questioning where it's going to lie, it looks like from end to end, at least as regards the town boundaries, it's going to be within the town. Next slide, please. The other questions we got was regarding where the substation is going to be located and who the end user is. These are maps of a currently pending comp plan amendment and rezoning application for the Midwood Center, just across the street from Walmart. This particular land bay right here, despite the rezoning application and the comp plan, also has a final site plan currently in the works before the county. It's applied for by a company called VA Data. It's more appropriately known as Amazon VA Data, and their application is for a nearly 500,000 square foot data center. And if my understanding is correct, you want to locate the substation is to be located somewhere here next to the data center. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. Next slide, please. One of the other issues, I want to thank one of the residents out in the rural Crescent, is what else can be done besides the power lines. And I've checked with a few people. This is one of those smaller stations. I'm not exactly sure what you guys would call it, that could be co-located within the easement at the base of the power station. And although you can't read it here, this is a letter from the county that essentially says, if Dominion Power or some cell company wants to erect arrays on the towers, they can do so without public hearing. In other words, there will be no public input. They can do it almost essentially by right. Next slide, please. Underground lines can be done. Here's one in the heavily urban area of Arlington. I forget, I think this was a 9-mile section of underground that you did for Radnor? How long is it?
It's 2.6. 2.6? From the southern triangle up to the proposed Radnor.
Okay, I thought it was longer than that, but in any event, it can be done and has been done. Next slide, please. And it's also been done in rural areas, particularly Loudoun County. Next slide. This is the last slide. I want to point out this. The substation and the power line is to run somewhere up here, but if you look at the map, the preponderance of the commercial growth in this area, planned and existing, is down here and over here. I just want you to bear that in mind later on, because we're going to have some discussion about that, and particularly where the termination of the line should be, or where we think it should be, and where the substation should be located. On that note, I'm going to open up for comments. I noticed Delegate Marshall's here, and afford Delegate Marshall the courtesy of going first. You can shut it down.
Come back to some of these, yeah.
We can leave it up.
Yeah.
I'm going to afford Delegate Marshall the opportunity to speak first if he so desires.
I just would ask Dominion to maybe categorize these questions. What I did not see was the suggested placement of where these power lines would go if you decide to go up the railroad track, which I really hope you don't. Secondly, please address the question of bringing the lines up 15. Thirdly, at the last meeting, you mentioned, I forget the term that was used
On that note, I would invite anybody else who wishes to speak. Please come up. Please give your name and address. I would prefer that everybody speak, come up here and speak, and we'll save the response for later just so we don't have the same question asked over and over again, the same response. I kind of want to try and construct this.
Right, and part of this, again, in that this is a public hearing of the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission is responsible for preparing a response. It would help, again, and we do have some written responses here, if you do come up, identify yourself, speak into the microphone. That way we will have a record of your concern, and we can carry that concern forward.
I just had one thing.
Sure.
I did contact the State Corporation Commission about coming up here like they did for VDOT area over at Kettle Run High School. And they said it's too early in the process, but I can assure you that myself and Senator Black and others will ask the State Corporation Commission to come up here. So the questions you're asking tonight, the suggestions you're making, are relevant to the input the State Corporation Commission has to take into account when making their decision. So it's correct. It means something with the decision. The State Corporation Commission take this input account, and the intensity with which you bring it up, and the rationality with which you bring the suggestions up to the hearing examiner, and you're sworn in. Heard me, all this kind of stuff. You're sworn in to give true testimony to the best of your knowledge. So we will get somebody here at the appropriate time. This is way too early for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, if anyone wishes to speak, just line up in the aisle. I hope that mic's on.
A little bit closer.
Tonight. Well, if he can be MC and hold it.
That's the thank you.
As long as nobody touches it, I think we're going to be okay. If we're going to fall, or just lay it on there. Lay it on there. There you go.
My name's Tim Lamb. I live in Green Hill Crossing. I haven't heard the role of Amazon since we're doing this kabuki dance because Amazon is going to put a data center out here.
Quiet for that, please.
And we talked about increased cost, and that's one of the reasons you have to not go underground. I was wondering if there's been any discussion or any study on the role of Amazon in sharing with those costs or even paying for the underground lines. And that's just something I'd like to have explored.
Hi, my name's Ken Farron. I own a home on St. Paul Drive, located in Haymarket. I want to find out how, if the second alternative route for the right-of-way behind the tracks, so I guess that was the south side of the tracks, what is the furthest they could possibly move back towards the Somerset area? I know the Somerset people don't want it any closer than they needed it to be, or want it to be, I should say, but I want to know the farthest possible that those lines would be from the track itself. Also, I'm very curious to find out, and as some of the ladies here said, and we were talked about beforehand, I would like to know that if we were given the option to, if we needed to help pay for this line to go underground, what homes would be affected, how many people would be contributing towards that, and what that amount would be based on, let's say, average use of a monthly bill. If we're looking at $2 or $3 a month, even maybe 10 or 12 a month, maybe even 20. I don't know what people's hurt point is, but I'd like to have that information so we can say, you know what, okay, look, we'll help you put it underground. We just really do want to know what the cost is going to be. Thank you.
Maria Turner, Haymarket, or 18th Century Haymarket. Embedded online in this very remote area is a comment on their website, is a comment from Virginia Department of Health. And in partial, I quote, even if it is assumed that there is an increased risk of cancer as implied in some epidemiological studies, the empirical relative risk appears to be fairly small in magnitude. I moved here 14 years ago. Before I moved here, I lived near one of these. My son got a brain tumor. His friend's father down the street died of it. I have been told that if they come behind my house, my grandchildren will not be able to come see me.
Jim Napoli, Somerset Crossing, and president of the Somerset Crossing HOA. I just had a few questions to put on record. Just going off of some of the comments that were made this evening. First, there was a comment about appropriately notifying both the residents, the affected areas, and the SCC. So with respect to the residents, I'd like to know how they draw the line as to who receives a notice, they being Dominion Power, who receives a notice and who does not. While they took pictures in my front yard for one of these diagrams that didn't make this cut, but it was at another meeting we saw it, I did not even receive a notice. My wife and I did not receive a notice by mail. It was a neighbor 5 houses down that received that notice. Are we going to get notification prior to the SCC filing? And if so, how much advance notice? Or is it going to be something where it'll kind of be slipped in and it's up to us to follow? With respect to the SCC and the comment, again, of appropriate notification, more information is better, have there been environmental tests or studies of the area? It seems to me that Dominion was caught a little off guard or by surprise when we started talking about the habitat that they would like to cut through on their current proposal, and that being the wetlands. We do have endangered species that live back there. We do have migratory birds, and we do have a wetland. Plus, have they done any type of study of how that will affect the water management system of our community? Everything actually drains down into the wetlands and works its way through. So it's part of our storm management system. Bear with me for a moment, I'm sorry. With respect to the cost, one of the things I'd like to hear as well is potential remediation. We know that there are going to be costs. There's going to have to be property that would be purchased. For instance, Somerset Crossing does own the woods that run behind Somerset Crossing up to the railroad track or the railroad easement. Plus the remediation to the homes that would, whose value would significantly depreciate under this proposal. We know, for example, that there is remediation for, let's say, a developer who hasn't developed the property yet. Part of their remediation package is typically not only the property that has to be purchased for right-of-way, but also diminished value in the property. That's typically factored in from what I'm told. And I think that's really it, other than to say I wish that Dominion would look at other alternatives, take them serious, because as I said before from the floor, I think this is the worst possible proposal in that it hits wetlands, it hits well over 1,000 homes in terms of home value, in terms of potential health risks. With the health risk, what I will say is the best that Dominion can give us is there is nothing to prove that definitively proves that there is no cancer risk. But as I told them in one of my meetings with them, that's enough to impact the market. And if we're just talking dollars and cents, the fact is that will have an impact. And I just don't get a sense that there is real that they're really looking at the other alternatives closely. I'd like to know, I'm sorry, one more thing as I'm thinking off the top of my head here. I'd like to know how long they've worked on this proposal, because it does seem so odd to me that you have 15, you have 66, and then you have wetlands and homes. It doesn't seem very thoughtful. That's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jeff Kruger. I'm in Green Hill Crossing as well off St. Paul. I guess piggybacking off a couple of other folks have said, it strikes me that they're really only looking at overhead options with a little small consideration to the underground options, even though the number of impacted homes is much less. I guess I'd be very curious to see a cost breakout for each option, and maybe more alternatives on underground options, as well as them as we get into both as a city and as a on the power side. If we have additional cost, how would we, both as a community or as a larger piece, what are our options to offset that? I don't know if that's something, talking about additional tax places. Do we do that as a city? Do we do that as a county? Do we do that as a Dominion Power? I don't know that answer, but that's maybe something. If we can come up with that, may help us. I guess come up with a working alternative towards them. I do think one thing we need to look at is there's a lot of discussion on no, I don't want to do this, and I can very much appreciate that. I don't want to do it either, but we have. I think we have to come up with it's in our interest to come up with an alternative that gets something moving down the line. If we try to fight it without coming up with an alternative or a better option, we're just kind of be shooting ourselves in the foot and end up in more trouble than if we tried to at least mitigate the damage. So as best we can try to help them and help ourselves, we can maybe come up with something. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot one point. This is just on the cost issue. One of the things I want to be clear on is my understanding after reading the proposals and the information and speaking with Dominion is that the line that will be going through does not really impact current homes. While it will reinforce what we already have, which I don't know about you, but we have not had problems with our electricity, so I do applaud Dominion on that. We haven't had power outage issues. It does not directly affect us. This is driven by a corporate consumption as well as future growth. So when we start talking about cost and spreading the cost, again, it seems inequitable to me to have 1,500 homes or so bear the cost of something that doesn't even help us in any real way. So there is no benefit to us. It's just purely cost.
Is anybody else who'd like to comment?
I'm Dottie Leonard. I've lived in Haymarket for 42 years. I'm speaking for the citizens for the betterment and harmony of Haymarket and western Prince William County. I can only say that for all of us, it has been a joy to view the beautiful Bull Run Mountain, and we've often said Haymarket is nestled at the foothills of the first mountain west of D.C. Anything that would impair that beauty for us would be a negative and would be a major property values affecting issue. I would also say that when it comes to hallowed ground, Haymarket was burned to the ground during the Civil War and has slowly built itself back. I don't know how much more hallowed you can be than that. So I would ask that the very least consider the medium-sized poles and the routes that were suggested by Delegate Marshall, but the preference of the citizens group would be to have it be underground, and we think that it could be cost-effective because we've learned in Haymarket burying lines later is not cost-effective. So we hope you'll give strong consideration to a complete underground situation.
Anybody else? All right. planning commission members, and I'd like for the, in the interest of responding to those questions, which I'm sure are going to come up from us, I would like a response to our questions as they come up to save some time, because it'll prevent me from asking it twice and everybody else from asking it twice. Start with Commissioner Maddox.
I just have a couple questions. First, I wanted to find out, did Dominion know about the Amazon project, and if so, why haven't they been forthcoming about it? Can you?
Well, I'll speak to that, because I've heard that E-word used a number of times, and we are not in a position to confirm or deny who our client is. So, you made reference, I think someone else made reference to that. We're under a confidentiality clause with our client, and so we have, we're neither confirming or denying who that client is. That's where you were going or not. My name is Chuck Mann. I'm in community relations. I've heard that mentioned, and in fact, the first citizen engagement that we had here with town council, there was a gentleman there who accosted me and asked me point blank who the customer was, and I told him that we were not in a position to confirm or deny who that client is. And I don't know if that's where you were going or not, we can take it from there, but that's essentially how we come out the gate. There was someone earlier who had mentioned that, I think it was a gentleman right here, had mentioned that, and we kind of left it hanging out there, and I'm saying, hey, we're not going to comment on our customers.
And before we move any further, whoever is speaking, please allow them to speak. There's a great deal of murmuring and conversation. It's difficult enough to hear. Please let the speaker speak uninterrupted. Thank you.
You mind if I interject for something?
Sure.
I find your wording curious but expected. I can understand you're not the constraints of your confidentiality agreement, but the word that I take issue with is your client. You're constructing a power line for your client that impacts us, and I understand why.
A customer is a better word. It's a customer.
Potential customer.
Yes.
Okay.
Existing customer.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll take your word for it. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. And the second add-on to that first question is the primary reason for this project in the first place is to help facilitate the customer's needs or the client's needs versus reinforcing our current infrastructure. And I say that because with the current infrastructure we have out here, you're talking about adding a couple of cables on the top of the infrastructure. And has that infrastructure actually been measured or gauged to see whether or not it can withstand the weight, if there's any health risk for people walking along their brand new street walk or streetscape?
Yeah, the existing facilities that are out running along the north side of Washington Street today, the poles that are there today, as you described, they have a cross arm that's at pretty much at the top of that structure today. So what we're actually doing is putting in a new pole right next to the old pole that's going to be tall enough for both sets of cross arms. And I'm speaking to this, but Denise Stevens is here with Dominion Distribution. She is your local design supervisor, and she will be overseeing the project team that will do that reinforcement work that we talked about. So she can answer specific questions about construction, safety, and the actual physical structure of the poles. But I hope that sort of clarifies what's actually going to be happening is we will transfer the existing wires to that new pole that's adjacent to. We will add the second tier, and then the old pole will be removed once all of those facilities are transferred over.
Do we know how much, as far as an EMF output, that would increase as a result of adding those extra lines?
Do you have any calculations on electromagnetic fields? Yeah.
Josh, to save us from circling back.
No.
I've got two questions based on Josh's last question. Please, anybody else, if you got a question, please ask. My understanding is you're going to erect a new pole, transfer the lines to the new pole, and then, I'm assuming, eliminate the existing pole?
That's correct.
And this has been in the plan for how long? Roughly? When did you first start down this road?
We probably talked about it for about 4 months or so.
I just want to point out that if you've only been doing this for 4 months, we've been in the midst of a utility relocation that's been on the plans for years. And we were told that Dominion didn't want to incur the expense of moving some of the poles. And now you're going to do exactly what? It boggles my mind sometimes.
I think we've been working with Holly on the relocation that you're describing.
But now you're going to go above and beyond that relocation, and it just seems curious to me that here we are at the finish line of our relocation, and now you're moving everything again. EMF. I understand your distribution lines, but you're talking about a transmission line that you're going to put at the top, correct?
No.
That's just going to be another distribution line?
Yes.
The bridging line is not a
distribution voltage.
So it's not 230?
Not a transmission line. No.
Okay. It just seemed the way you were doing the express line that seemed like it was going to be at a higher voltage than your regular.
I apologize, and maybe that's part of the question that Delegate Marshall asked as well. The distribution poles that we're going to be adding the double build, that's another distribution line on the top of that.
It's not a 230 kV?
No, it's not 230 kV. It's not a high voltage or a transmission line at all. That is really, as we described, a short-term fix to get us through until 2017 when we can have the transmission infrastructure in place. And I think actually you asked me a question, or there was a part of your question about the benefit for the town.
Right.
And I wanted to reemphasize that, both the short-term distribution work and, bless you, the ultimate transmission line will benefit not just the town of Haymarket, but the larger Haymarket area. Because again, today, all of these areas are served by long distribution lines that originate in Gainesville. In the future state, when we have a transmission line that brings that high voltage source of power directly out to your area, all of those distribution circuits are going to be reconnected at that Haymarket substation. So where today, your house could be at the end of a 6-mile line with all that orange growth that you're showing between you and the substation where that power originates. In the future state, those electrons just have to go from Haymarket to Haymarket. They're going to go from the west side of 15 over to the east side of 15 and serve all these homes and businesses. It's a much shorter circuit length, which reduces your vulnerability. Now, I appreciate the comments about how good the reliability has been from Dominion so far. We want to maintain that. And the reason this isn't just about a data center is because with that data center coming online, we want to make sure that we can continue to serve the local area reliably like we have in the past. And it's too much. It's too much for the existing system to handle. It's too much for even an enhanced or reinforced distribution system to handle, which is why we have to have the transmission source to be able to serve not just the businesses and the developing businesses, but all of the homes that are located in this area as well.
Yeah.
Does that help?
It does. Okay. I've just got a couple of quick ones that we'll move on.
Sure.
So I grew up in Fairfax County. I lived in Springfield, Arlington. Most of the infrastructure I recall or remember, a good amount of underground. You have a huge line on one of your single pole setups where it goes from Springfield all the way down through Berg into Prince William County. They're big, they're ugly. I used to ride my dirt bike around them when I was a kid. Now, when I envisioned that, and I envisioned all the properties that were alongside, they weren't the best properties. And I would hope that we don't meet that same fate, especially with the folks with Green Hill Crossings and Somerset Crossings. So, as far as my personal opinion, and I'm sure the opinion of most people here, if we're going to cross anything in town, it would have to be underground. It would have to be along 66, preferably on the north side. if you're going to study that, I would encourage you to study that. How soon could we get an evaluation based on that proposition?
I know the team has made a note. We're going to look at that running along the undergrounding along the north side of 66. The other thing that I think we all probably made a note of, we can get an estimate done that will help everybody have a better understanding of the cost differential between overhead and underground. I've heard that from several folks. So that's something that we can produce.
Right. And going into my last question, it would be, what would you estimate the underground cost would be versus the current costs?
And we'll get that calculation. One thing I wanted to comment on when you were describing Fairfax County, Dominion is making more and more of an effort to put our distribution system underground where it makes sense, the lower voltage lines, because we can reduce the frequency of outages. And over the long term, those costs are recouped eventually because the lines are better protected underground. It's not the same for the high voltage system, which is why only about 1% of our system, and we saw a couple of the key projects that we have put underground, but those two projects that we showed are about 1% of all the projects that we're currently building overhead.
And you did talk about the humming, especially with the higher poles. When I last lived in Burke before I moved over here to Haymarket a couple of years ago, I lived in a neighborhood that was right next to one of those. And over the 3.5-year period I lived in that residence, I probably heard humming for 2.5 years out of 3 years, nonstop consistent. So in terms of the technology you had mentioned earlier to detect these anomalies and the frequent checks to make on the lines, what kind of assurance would you give us, worst case scenario, God forbid, there would actually be an above ground line that divides, that goes from Gainesville to the Haymarket station?
Well, the assurance that we can offer is that the lines will be within the county ordinance. Beyond that, I'm not sure how.
Right. Like I said, you were talking about reliability, being able to minimize the noise, disturbances, but I have not. I haven't seen it in action in Fairfax County. I have a big concern for that here in Prince William. Regardless of ordinances, that if you want to sell the product, you have to see more than, or be sold on more than, well, we'll just follow the ordinances. A lot of people aren't educated on the ordinances. So, and hopefully on Wednesday we'll be more open in terms of detailed ordinances that you dictate so we can better understand how you articulate your project. But those are my questions.
Commissioner Green?
Let me first start with exactly what these new power lines are going to be running through the town are. My understanding from the last meeting was that they would serve the needs of the commercial client for the short term until the long term in 2017 was built. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so they will be going in and they will be serving that commercial customer.
Not yet. Thank you, Deborah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, but part of it. So these are, and from last meeting, it was my understanding that they were 230 kilovolt lines. That is not correct. They are just low voltage distribution lines.
Correct. The lines through town are distribution lines, just like you have today. There will just be two circuits
Just
instead
two
of one.
tiers, yeah. Okay.
That's right.
The two tiers on individual circuits.
Those lines are just distribution lines. Transmission lines require specific structures and a very specific right-of-way.
Okay, so that was my misunderstanding from that one. Then, okay.
For what it's worth, I think that was everybody's impression, given the way it was presented. It could just be a way the slide was written.
No, that's fine.
That's really good feedback, and we'll try to clarify that going forward.
I'm the first one to admit that I've got a great ignorance about this, and I'm trying to cure that here. Ignorance can be cured.
We don't expect
that, but
so wherever the high voltage lines go in, those distribution lines will remain. There will be power running through them. Those are a long-term solution per se. It's not as though they'll be dormant or taken down after 2017.
I just want to clarify. I might restate some of what you just said.
Okay.
Once the high voltage transmission line is built to feed the local substation. The distribution lines that run through town and the new express distribution line that will be added, both of those lines will stay energized, and that express line will become a backup to serve the local area.
Okay, but it will not be, and this is another impression that I had from the last one, it will not be a backup for the entire high voltage distribution line. Let's say that it does go underground, there is a break in that high distribution line, that second tier line will not be a hot swap effectively for that.
Yeah, they're two different voltages,
Okay.
two dramatically different capacities. Now, if both circuits of the transmission line, and remember we're talking about a double circuit transmission line, so from the day we install, you have a backup in place on the transmission system, the high voltage system. So if both lines were to be taken out,
Truck comes through, poles come down.
right, or a bulldozer, if they're underground, a bulldozer cracks through the casing and disconnects the underground circuits. Either way, all of those customers that are served by that substation would be out, except for any ability that we have to make distribution ties in the field with some of our other local substations. And again, the improvements that we're talking about making with both of these systems will help enable that going forward.
Okay. Just a personal question. I think the other thing they said is the last time there was a break in an underground line, it took 4 months to find the break. You guys don't do TDR on your lines?
TDR?
You get a break, you shoot TDR, time delay reflexometry?
Well, I'm not an engineer. I know I probably look like one, but I'm not, and I apologize because we don't have our Mark
Okay.
Allen was the engineer that was with us that night.
Okay.
The issue isn't finding the fault, and we may or may not use the technology you're describing. The issue is the highly skilled labor that is used for splicing and making repairs to these lines. Again, because there aren't that many underground lines in this country, most of those specialists come from Korea.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about exactly the impact that putting these temporary lines is going to have on the town. When you're saying that there are going to be new poles put in, old poles are going to come out, roughly, you have an idea of how long that's going to take? Just let's frame it right in Haymarket.
The 10
Yeah.
in town.
Okay. One end of town to the other. How long is that going to take? Yeah.
We'll probably start seeing some women actually now after the first of the year. And then hopefully be finishing up early spring.
Okay. And when I'm assuming this is not a simple process, I'm assuming there's going to be traffic disruptions. There's exactly what's going to occur. What's going to be the impact day to day on the residents of Haymarket?
We'll be working during the hours of the PDOT permit. If you don't now, I guess their hours start from 9:30 to 3. So you really won't see any crews in the field rush hour times. That's really those times to avoid the rush hours. We'll try to work off the road as much as possible. It's going to be a little more difficult.
We don't have much in the way of leeway there.
It's narrow.
The parking lot, things like that, we'll try to do that. There'll probably be, in the areas where we have Shell Road, it'll go down to one lane, so they'll basically be setting up at one pole and a flag around the pole and finish that.
So there'll be a daily disruption for 6 months?
3 to 4.
3 to 4?
Maybe not quite that long, but I said, I think you're going to see most of it when you're in this area here, kind of concrete areas, or a little bit further up where there's, a gas station or something like that, where you pull in the parking lot and get off the road, and it shouldn't be as bad. Probably right through here, right out the front here.
All the way to there's not very few places to pull off. Okay, all right. I, to a certain extent, also share Bob's incredulity on our streetscape. Part of our streetscape plan called for burying these lines, and you just said low voltage underground. You're trying to do that as much as possible because it makes sense long term. I'm assuming that no one either on the council or on the PC and on the ARB, I don't think that anybody in the town has been approached about the possibility of burying these lines. When you say you're working with Holly, exactly what have you done?
And I don't. Do you know who the designer is that worked with Holly by chance on the? Because I can't remember. Holly could probably tell us. I know she's had several questions for me when we've popped in for other briefings. And I want to clarify that anytime we have like a new residential development, it's much easier to put those lines underground because you're starting with a clean slate.
Right. You can tear up as much ground as you want.
Well, for an existing established area like this, it's much more complicated. Number one, because we already have feeds established for every business along the street. So it's just a more cumbersome, complicated process. And I don't know what was discussed between you and the Dominion representative when you were working on the streetscape. And I can't speculate as to how that might have been different if we had known where we would be today.
I can fill you in. Having been through this the last 10 years, I can actually fill you in somewhat on this. And the reason given as much as 10 years ago was strictly cost prohibitive by Dominion, and sort of died at that point.
Have approached us where we have overhead lines going through town, and they'll approach us about putting everything underground. We show them what we actually have to do, and the costs involved, and the structures that have to go in, and the structures that have to go on private property. They usually just say yes to that.
Yeah. We just finished tearing up all of our streets, and putting down new brick sidewalks.
Yeah. Well, you have to remember those green boxes that would have to go every.
Yeah. No, I used to have one of those in my yard, and then it went away, and then it came back, and then it went away. I was one of the first residents in Green Hill, so.
That's my yard.
All right. Also, okay, so in terms of the time frame, we've heard some ambiguous language. We don't think VDOT will like this. We haven't spoken to the railroad. We don't know if there have been environmental impact studies. Exactly where are you guys in this? Have you talked to the railroad about the right-of-way? Have you talked to VDOT? Do you have answers? Are you in negotiations? What are you doing in terms of initiating studies? Where are you in the process?
Diana, do you want to talk about Diana or Chris?
Sure. We have met with VDOT on a larger scale and asked, because there is a code, a Virginia State code, that does not allow utilities in a limited access right. So during this meeting, and it is not only this job, but we have others, and we did meet with VDOT, and we said, can we work together here? Areas are getting constrained. Allow us to utilize some of your limited access. We think they will. We don't know to what extent they will allow us. I know we had approached them about the overhead route that we were looking at. They said they would work with us on that. They just want to make sure that we're not going to impede them from being able to expand their right-of-ways when it needs to happen.
Same thing with the railroads.
Right.
They don't want to be constrained.
Right. We have not talked with Norfolk Southern. I do have a call into VRE, and we are going to meet with Norfolk Southern as well to find out what their plans are for the rail extension. On the environmental surveys, we're not necessarily, we haven't started surveys. We have started desktop surveys. general impression is that if we're not going to impact the stream or the stream banks, then we're not going to impact or have very little impact on the endangered species.
So I guess to sort of summarize and reiterate what I hope we've said throughout this meeting and the other meetings, we're at a pretty preliminary stage in the development of what we will ultimately submit to the State Corporation Commission. So there's a lot of work happening in parallel paths. Diana and the routing and permitting team are continuing to reach out to these different agencies and organizations. As a project team, we are continuing to come and participate in meetings so we can hear feedback, hear concerns, and hopefully get information that we can incorporate into the ultimate routing study that we will submit to the SCC.
In that, I'm assuming that neither VDOT nor the railroad works very quickly. You have a rather aggressive scale or time frame for submitting to the SCC. So that concerns me. Because if you are, the more studies that you do on the quantity of routes, the longer that's going to take, unless you put more people on the job, and that's more expense. So I have some concerns about that. One of the other concerns we've heard a lot tonight, moving on, is about amortizing the cost, how that's going to be borne. I don't know that a special tax jurisdiction is going to fly really well. Exactly, and again, this is just trying to overcome the ignorance and trying to have people understand how this is done. So we have this, in your words, with the data center coming online. So we do have a rather large commercial customer. How much of the cost are they expected to bear of the new construction? How much of the cost percentage-wise are the local communities anticipated to bear? And how does that show up? Is that, like you say, is it a special assessment? Is it amortized in a bill over the next 30 months, 30 years? How does that exactly work out? And again, this is one of the questions that keeps repeating itself, because one of the things that we hear is, if our bill goes up a couple cents on the dollar, fine, let's do it the more expensive way.
So I don't have the percentages, but the data center would pay a different proportion, an increased proportion of the total cost. The cost of a transmission project is reflected in your customer bill, your monthly bill. It typically shows up as a rider T for transmission, and this project cost is lumped in with other transmission projects that are going on around the system. So the good news for Haymarket is with a standard overhead line, everyone else across the state helps pay the cost of that project. The flip side of that coin is the other projects that we're working on, you know, those same customers pay for all of those projects. So there's one combined total that is spread across the customer base as that rider T. And then as far as the breakdown of the cost, the difference between overhead and underground, I can assure you it's not pennies or dollars, but we will get that breakdown so we can share that so that folks have a better understanding of what we're talking about.
Well, I think we have two questions on the cost. One in terms of your construction cost. What is the difference between going through the wetlands, doing all the remediation, running a longer power line, et cetera, everything that's involved with that, and running an underground line? Is it $5 million and $20 million, just to throw out some numbers?
Right.
And then secondly, based on that cost differential, how does that show up in our bill? So those are the two things I think that we're interested in.
Okay. And my project manager is probably going to kill me for this, but this is just, spitballing for you threw out the $5 million to $20 million. So I'm going to give you different spitball figures, but we know that the current project as proposed is $65 million. So my spitball, not even back of the napkin, would be more on the order of magnitude of $300 million for underground. And again, we will provide real figures for you. That is not an actual cost. That's not even an estimated cost, but just from an order of magnitude perspective.
It's a magnitude, right.
That's
fine.
more in line with what we're probably talking about.
Do you mind if I interject?
Go ahead.
I'm glad Delegate Marshall's here because perhaps he can fill us in on this a little bit. You just mentioned the cost to put it underground. I know that Senator Stosh, I believe Mr. Sazlaw, both submitted bills to General Assembly last year and in previous years to pass the cost on for undergrounding distribution lines. It's my understanding that a provision in both of those bills and in the past bills was that those costs would be borne by the residential and the everyday customers, and that the industrial consumer of those services, the one who's going to principally derive the benefit in this particular case, are exempt from the rate increases. Is that correct?
Not for transmission.
I don't think so.
So they would carry the...
What she's talking about in Stafford, they distributed the cost of undergrounding, and down there it was 5.5 or 6 to 1. 13 million to just under $80 million down in Stafford. And yes, it was 5.5 to 6 to 1 under those circumstances. And they distributed the cost to people down in Danville, to people in Alexandria, system-wide. So everybody's building on the board.
And just as an update, once we completed that project, because you're exactly right, that's what was presented to the SCC, that's what the SCC approved. When we were done with that project, the total cost of putting that line underground was over $130 million. So the final project ended up being closer to 10 to 1 when looking at underground compared to the overhead option that we estimated originally.
On that note, if you're going to do a comparison of the cost of undergrounding it versus overhead, I would appreciate it if you provided the cost of undergrounding it on all your alternative routes. So, I mean, if you're going to run it back through there, you've got an inherent cost involved in environmental remediation, clearing, and all of that stuff, as opposed to running, for argument's sake, let's say an underground power line or an underground transmission line on the north side of 66, where you've got a different topographic situation, which would be considerably less expensive than undergrounding it through a creek bed. So if you could come up with it, so that we can kind of rack and stack them and look at,
apples to
compare apples to apples on that.
Understood.
You're asking, Mr. Chairman, for you're asking for this sort of an estimate?
An estimate would be acceptable, just for discussion purposes. I don't need a, I think it would serve everybody's purpose, kind of get a sense of what it's going to cost, one route versus the other, overhead versus underground. But rather than compare simply one route and one underground option to one overhead option, or one underground option and 6 overhead options, if you're going to have several viable corridors, I'd like to see a cost comparison so that we can make an educated sort of comparison, and I'm assuming it would ultimately impact our recommendation.
We will do at least one full engineered cost underground.
Yeah.
In terms of the order of magnitude, I mean, you can feel pretty good estimating 6 to 10 times as much. And if it needs to get it, I'm really having a, I mean, that to me says a pretty good piece of information in terms of order of magnitude.
I understand that, but your engineering costs and your environmental constraints are going to raise the project fee if you're running it through the woodland back there. It's going to have a much different order of magnitude than if you're running it next to the VDOT right away on 66. Does that make sense?
I guess what I'm trying to say is some of the routes are not going to be buildable overhead. Some of them won't be buildable underground.
I understand
It's
that.
hard to see when we give a price, people hear a price and they think that it...
And we're going to talk viable routes in a moment, whether or not what I'm even thinking about is viable. But that's what I'd like, is viable routes, a cost comparison. And we'll get into the specifics on that. Sorry about that.
No problem. Buckland Mills. Does Buckland Mills have any state or federal designation as historic areas?
Yes.
And is that, Buckland Mills is a pretty big area. You were talking about different categorizations.
That's
some
right.
of it was study, some of it was...
Eligible. Some of
Okay.
it's registered.
Some of it is, but there is either a state or federal designation as And historic district or, okay.
Yes.
All right, which is different than the town of Haymarket.
Yes.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that was the caveat there. That's all I wanted to do. And in terms of, I mean, and there's a great concern about taking a property or condemnation of property. I'm assuming that would not occur until actually the SCC made their decision.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. So let me talk about that. And I guess, you know, going back to your question about VDOT and Norfolk Southern, the VRE, I want to reiterate that, you know, we do our best to put together this application. You know, we recognize there's a need. We've developed a solution. And, you know, this is how we feel is the best approach to solve that problem. We present that to the SEC, and then, you know, they go through their process to tell us what we're going to build. So we don't do final engineering until they tell us what route we're building. So we're not seeking permits from Norfolk Southern or VDOT. It's really more of a conceptual conversation at this point. So yeah, a lot of the things that folks may want really specific concrete answers on right now, we're not there yet because we don't know what the SEC is going to tell us to build. So to your question, we're not going to start acquiring right-of-way through the wetlands or along 66 because the SEC may tell us to run it up 15. So we don't know the outcome, so we can't take any of those steps until we have a final order from the State Corporation Commission. Now, when we have that final order and they have directed us, this is the route, we make every effort. We typically work with a local appraiser. We put together an offer package for the property owners. We work with those property owners. We make every effort to come to a settlement with the property owner. Eminent domain or condemnation is a last resort.
And the town has done those. Speaking of permitting, I'm assuming that in the running the new power poles out here, your current right-of-way gives you the right to do that without applying to the town.
That's my understanding. Right, Denise?
Yeah, that would be a VDOT permit.
Right, okay. So you guys could theoretically just show up and start doing work. Not saying necessarily that you wouldn't give us any notice, but you could.
I would agree with your statement that the existing easement gives us the right to perform the upgrade work that we've described. But yeah, no, to Denise's point, we do have to go through a permitting process.
Right, but it is with VDOT, it is not with the town.
That is correct.
Okay, that's fine. Just, again, a clarification. That's all. I'm looking for information. I'm not trying to be hostile. I'm sure you face enough of that. I think I'm done for now.
Councilman Carter?
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate you coming and appreciate you listening. I would just, rather than repeat what's already been stated, I would really like you to consider looking at Route 15 corridor. Really take a look and see what that looks like. And then north of Route 66, Interstate 66, see what that looks like. Reading your literature online, it really seems to me, listening, if I had to sum it all up in a sentence, is really coming down to cost. The cost of your proposed route as opposed to the other routes and underground. They're both reliable, as stated in your stuff on your website. The 10 to 1, 6 to 1, and I get that amount. Obviously, underground has been done in other areas. So, in summation, really again, Route 15, what does that look like? What does north of 66 look like? And putting it underground as opposed to impacting residents. And really, the way I look at it, at the end of the day, whatever it costs, people are going to look at this thing for an awfully long time.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
to To me, cost today, looking quality of life for the residents of this town community 40, 50 years down the road seems pretty minimal in my way of looking at it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
I'm going to try and recap all the issues, and
It's so it begins.
this might be a while.
Should I sit down?
You probably should.
No, he's not kidding. He's
I'm not
double-dishing.
kidding. Bring a stool. I'll be honest with you. I'm a cynical type, so I've had many go-rounds with public utilities, state agencies like VDOT, and I always sort of take a skeptical view of what's presented. And I'll be honest with you. I've sat here tonight and I've heard, yes, we've talked to VDOT. No, we haven't talked to VDOT. Maybe we've talked to VDOT. We're going to talk some more to VDOT. And you're dealing with an expedited process. I mean, I do a lot of work with the feds, and I'm sort of used to having things sprung on the Labor Day weekend or the 4th of July weekend or Thanksgiving or Christmas when there's, little opportunity for extensive public comment, and they do it intentionally. And we're dealing with an expedited process here where it just seems like everything is steaming along. So I've got a lot of questions. I'm going to try and take them in the order of your presentation so that we can kind of maintain some continuity here. I'm pretty familiar with the level of commercial growth in this particular area. The town, the 5-mile radius around the town, and I'm going to circle back to it, but I think your estimation of what your power demand by 2017 is going to be for this particular location is a little bit overstated. I can point to millions of square feet of commercial space that within the last 2 years have been rezoned. They've been rezoned from commercial and industrial down to residential. Villages at Piedmont 2 come initially to mind because that wiped out almost 1 billion feet of commercial and industrial space along Route 15, which I'm assuming would impact your calculations as to what your demand is going to be. The population growth, yeah, it exists. It's largely to the north and the east. It's not really out here on the west. You're sort of on the fringe, which I kind of have an issue with. But, I mean, that's all something that needs to be considered when we talk about location, and I want to talk about that in a moment. The other thing is property values. We've heard at this hearing, well, not particularly at this hearing, but at previous hearings, that the property value impact is potentially minimal. I refer back to a 2006 Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission. I'm sure Delegate Marshall's familiar with this JLARC report on the evaluation of underground electronic transmission lines in Virginia. I would take particular note of page 106, wherein they deem that property values are not generally considered by the SCC with regard to undergrounding. I'm not surprised, but it's a finding that I think everybody here should be aware of. Yes, it's going to impact your property rights. Is it going to play? Is that concern going to play a big role with the SCC? Probably not. It just is what it is. Similarly, within the report, it says they do seem to decrease. It does seem to decrease the property value. So, I mean, it is what it is. Everybody should be prepared for that. We've already spoken about the alternatives and the cost distribution. Danger trees, we've already taken care of that. Come back to this. Back to that. I've got a question on the tax implications, and pardon my ignorance on this. I know what the tax implication of putting in a data center is, from the county's perspective, from the state's perspective. What sort of real property tax they're going to pay, what sort of B-poll tax they're going to pay, what sort of business personal property tax they're going to pay. I'm curious what, if any, taxes does Dominion pay, not only for the infrastructure within the power corridor, but also for your substation, because you're going to be taking viable taxable property. It doesn't particularly impact the town's tax situation, but it does impact the county tax situation potentially, and that's a concern since we're all county residents.
And the town. There are we pay taxes on those physical assets annually. So theoretically, for the structures that are located within the town limits, we would make an annual tax payment to the town of Haymarket.
Actually, it goes to the state now. Correct, Delegate Marshall? And you guys are taking a percentage off the top? Utility taxes are now paid to the state, which takes a cut, which I think is why our utility tax revenue has diminished over the last couple of years. Thank you, General Assembly.
And yes, we would make a payment to Prince William County for the assets that are located in the county.
But is that charged at their regular business personal property tax rate, real estate rate, or is that at a set scale? I don't know.
Our taxes on our infrastructure is set by the State Corporation Commission, but it is
Question
pretty
answered.
much parallels what the taxes are paid by other corporate citizens on their property.
And to include the equipment taxes?
I think so. But we can get some definitive.
I'd just be curious from a comparison standpoint. What is it tax revenue neutral? Is it tax revenue negative? I don't know.
Okay, yep, we can
I've never
look into the
sort
tax
of dealt
revenue.
with that before. So, cross that out. Let's talk alternative routes for a section, or the current route and alternative routes. Again, looking at the JLARC study and undergrounding of these types of transmission lines, these high voltage transmission lines, it seems like there are a couple of things that the SEC considers, very few of which I've heard spoken of tonight with regard to undergrounding it. Some of the considerations are, is your right-of-way limited? And I would suggest the answer is yes in many cases along this proposed route. Are there river crossings? In this case, no, but you are building in a creek bed, which is somewhat similar. Another consideration is, are you going through densely populated suburban areas? My guess would be you could make that argument when you're splitting Somerset and Green Hill Crossing. Does it have an impact on the visual amenities? For instance, you guys aren't supposed to put them overhead in national parks, as an example. We're a historic district, sort of. Has that been taken into consideration? It seems like it's been taken into consideration by Buckland with regard to Buckland Mills. And, I go back to the Wheeler-Walker line and all the problems that you have with Fauquier County and Buckland Mills. It sort of seems like Prince William's, for lack of a better term, the bastard stepchild. Fauquier says no, and the lines run through Prince William. It's just the impression that I've got. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. A large portion of the route that you want to build, your own map shows is constrained by a floodplain. We've talked VDOT. We've talked, who else you're going to have to, Norfolk Southern, who are you going to have to negotiate? I'm curious whether you guys have factored in the Corps of Engineers and what you're going to have to do with regard to building in a floodplain, submitting them grading plans, how it's going to impact the floodplain, what the impact is to us with regard to impacts on Chest Bay Act. And the other thing that sort of comes to mind when you start talking about environmental issues, and I think somebody asked this question, if you're going to build in the floodplain, if you're going to build in the wetlands, I'm assuming that you're going to have to take environmental credits, buy environmental credits elsewhere. The question is, are you going to buy environmental credits locally, or are you going to buy them down in Roanoke or, Henry County? It doesn't seem quite fair to me for you guys to purchase environmental credits in Southwest Virginia and apply them to a project in Nova. I'd be curious about that. I'm curious for an answer on that one.
Okay, great. We file a JPA, or a joint permit application. So the Army Corps of Engineers, actually the Department of Environmental Quality, the DEQ, conducts a coordinated review. So they share our project application with a multitude of state agencies, including the VMRC, the Virginia Marine Resource Commission, and the Army Corps of Engineers, among many others, also the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, Department of Conservation and Recreation, Department of Historic Resources, so among others. but the DEQ coordinates that review as part of the application process. And yes, we ultimately have to comply with the conditions that are set forth by all of those agencies, whether it relates to endangered species or migratory birds and the nesting cycles. Frequently on a project with sensitive areas or species like that, there are certain restricted months where we're not able to build because of the nesting cycles and so forth. So we do submit to all of those agencies, and the conditions that come back from those agencies become part of the approval that's issued by the State Corporation Commission.
Is that DEQ process open to public comment as well, or do they, and how do they coordinate that with the localities and with the impacted residents?
Yeah, and the localities are included in every step of the SEC application process. So the localities are participants in the case, and yes, in fact, I'm familiar with projects where the Army Corps of Engineers has hosted their own public hearing. Same thing for the VMRC. And it depends on the project. They don't do it for every project, but yes, there is certainly that opportunity for the localities and the public to participate in that review process.
Okay. Just a comment. It doesn't seem like you guys have begun your environmental assessment yet. I'm assuming, I have no issue with that. I understand where you are in the process. Save you some time. You might want to talk to Norfolk Southern because they have already completed that as part of their VRE double tracking expansion. So they're going to have a wealth of information. I suspect you're not going to like what you hear from them in terms of what constraints they found, but nevertheless, it might impact your proposed route rather dramatically once you figure out what the costs are going to be. And I suspect they would be more than willing to share it, although they haven't been really willing to publish it a whole lot. So they haven't talked about the expansion recently, but we shall see.
We will continue to try to make contact with them.
Alternate routes. I understand the route, whether it be overhead or underground, on the south side of 66 is not an option. And I understand why. But in looking at the overhead route that you had proposed for the north side of 66, it occurs to me that there's no little dots there, there's nobody's house there, and you're showing a right-of-way cut for an overhead line, which tells me that you've got plenty of right-of-way in place, that if the need to run that service, that high voltage line directly to the client site requires you to carry that line all the way out there, you've got more than enough room to run it down that small section of I-66 and bury it, not even in the VDOT right-of-way, but in the right-of-way next to it, probably owned by the Piedmont Homeowners Association, because it doesn't seem, at least from the scale maps that you're showing, it doesn't seem to impact directly any of the property owners' homes. So first blush appearances, it looks like you've got enough room between the VDOT right-of-way and the homeowners' property lines to put the line there, but I don't see that as one of your proposed options.
And I know the team made a note of that. We're going to take another look at that.
Again, this is one of those things that would just occur to me to be one of the first things that you would look at. You're quick to point out what the constraints of putting it on the south side are and to sort of dismiss that as an option, and rightfully so. But then we have very little discussion of the northern option.
Are you speaking of overhead or underground?
Both. But
and I think maybe it's important to say, because I'm not, well, just to make sure it's heard, that if there is given that there are constraints, interests, and and all that, if it can be built overhead, then that is what, again, we are required to present to the State Corporation Commission. So if there's a buildable overhead route for us to present as a preferred route for that to be underground, it's not likely. And so I just feel the need to make sure that is being said and heard, because I don't want to mislead anybody that if there's a buildable overhead route, that would be our preferred route. And if it's, so it says, well, let's say that we do the overhead route, and then again, that would be at all ratepayers' expense. If, for a
this gets back to the alternatives I mentioned earlier and why I want to see them racked and stacked. Because if we suddenly start talking overhead on the other side of I-66, then you've got 1,500 to 2,000 more people that are going to come in here or to Supervisor Candlin's office because they haven't been notified and don't know anything about it as an alternative. Because it hasn't appeared anywhere on your maps as an alternative. And they're going to be, the first thing they're going to ask is, if you're going to build it, why isn't it underground? So rather than go back to ground zero and start all over again, it would seem to me that if putting it on the north side is a viable option, and apparently it is, given your alternatives map, you might want to present both scenarios, because I'm sure that the residents who aren't impacted by this plan but would be impacted by that plan are going to be real angry that they weren't notified at an earlier stage. It's just an observation on my part, but I would like to see what the constraints on that are, because there doesn't appear any from your map, and if it's simply a cost issue, well, that's something that needs to be addressed in a different manner. Let me circle back. Okay. One of the very good comments that we had is, it does us little good, and it does the residents very little good, to sit here and scream and moan about the proposed location if we don't have an alternative. If somebody hit the lights for a second over there. And that's fine. And this gets to demand distribution. It doesn't show up very well, but this area right here, and you can see the designations written on the map. This is all long-range land use designations for this whole area between Route 29, which is over here, and Catharpin Road. Mm-hmm. You want to run the power line from 234 bypass to this point at Catharpin Road, come across this property, and then swing this way. With the exception of the data center here and the Walmart, there's no other commercial. The hospital. Mm-hmm. But there's a much greater area of commercial development here and across 29 at Gateway. What you're proposing to do is build your run your power line and build your substation here, and then, if I understand it correctly, run that power back down the existing, and I'm assuming additional distribution lines.
Mm-mm. Existing.
Only existing. So, if you run
the new double stack. I understand. Well, but the double stack doesn't run that. But
if you're building a substation here, and you've got commercial properties here that are running on a different line, I'm assuming that the line that services north of 66 is not directly tied to the line that services south of 66. Is that correct? Or am I mistaken? Your distribution lines.
Actually, they do cross over.
They do cross over? Okay.
Yeah.
So what you would be doing is you would be taking your service, your primary service, running it out to here, and then sending it back down the direction you just came from on the existing lines to service this area.
To some extent, not. And Denise, you may have to back me up on, or it may be a Harrison question, but the areas that you're pointing to along 29.
Between 29 and 55. This side of 29 principally. Before you get to the shopping centers over in Gateway.
Yeah, and I don't know where the planners would draw that line, but I can tell you,
right there.
Yeah, this orange area that you're referring to,
mm-hmm.
That area is served by the distribution lines that come out of the Gainesville substation.
So the same distribution lines that we're on?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So future state, those orange areas will still be served by Gainesville, which is the closest proximity to them, and those Gainesville lines continue on down 29. Haymarket and the immediate areas around Haymarket, including eventually the areas served by Novec, which would include like Dominion Valley and the surrounding areas, would be served by the Haymarket substation.
Now I'm confused.
Okay.
Because you're talking about a distribution circuit that's 6 miles long from the Gainesville substation to the proposed location of the Haymarket substation. The distance from Catharpin to your proposed substation is less than 2 miles. That's only 1/3 the distance, the existing distance from here to here. In other words, it's twice as far from here to the Gainesville substation. So they're going to be still serviced by the Gainesville substation?
That orange area, yes.
As a proposed alternative, given that there are millions, and I mean millions, of square feet of planned commercial development right in that orange area, and over here, and over here, and it's centrally located to your purported demand area, wouldn't it make more sense to place your substation on the currently vacant property that has no residential properties surrounding it, that will not require building a high voltage transmission line through the creek bed, splitting Somerset and Gainesville, and then using the existing distribution lines to carry that power not down a 6-mile stretch, but what is more likely 1.5 miles, presumably less than 2 miles?
May I take that question and get a response back to you, because there is a planner named Harrison Potter. He works in our Richmond office with us. He would be able to answer that very specifically about the exact circuits that come out of Gainesville, the current configuration, the future configuration, and I am confident he would do a better job of explaining it than I
You
could.
are more than welcome to take that question to him.
Perfect.
I would really appreciate it, because that's sort of the fly in the ointment. I mean, I look at the whole plan, and it seems like you're putting the substation at the far periphery and then backtracking when your principal, apart from the proposed data center, when the principal power users in the near term and the long term are going to be closer to the intersection of 66 and 29. And you've got property that is, I would argue, substantially less expensive to develop for your substation. The rights-of-way will be substantially less. You will not have to build as many towers. You will not have to condemn as many property, take it through condemnation, and you're not going to have the engineering issues that you would have taking it along the proposed route. I mean, I agree with the gentleman who spoke earlier. Quite frankly, you guys have picked possibly the most obnoxious route, the one that's going to irritate the most people. I mean, that's my sort of off-the-cuff view of it. If I were choosing a route and I really wanted to irritate people, that's the one I would have chosen. But it just seems to me more logical to centrally locate that substation and sort of have an array of your distribution lines from there, where you're limiting the length of those distribution lines rather than running it an additional 1.5 to 2 miles out and then radiating it back in and creating the same problem you're supposedly trying to correct, or at least to some extent.
Some of that new circuit that Carlos and the planner can give better explanation about. That new circuit is not only just expressing through, but it's helping to take some of the load off of some of the circuits that are already there. And that's further down the road. This circuit's coming from crossing over 66 and coming down Store Road.
Okay.
Right now, there's a public circuit there now. This new circuit is going to take over that top circuit. So that top circuit now is already becoming overloaded. So this new circuit is going to take part of that load off that circuit. And then the double circuit basically ends right where you're at Marvin on 55.
Okay.
And that's where that top circuit ends, that existing circuit. And then we'll extend that circuit. And that would extend it. That's now becoming the new circuit. But behind that, it's taking over the old circuit and taking that load off of that old circuit. So it's distributing the load down in that area also.
Okay. That's all the questions I had. I want to circle back and pick up some of the ones that haven't been answered by the residents. We've talked about your client and costs. Customer, excuse me. We talked about alternative routes, although somebody asked a question regarding the furthest setback towards Somerset. I'm assuming that, I'm just guessing, the furthest setback back would be sort of splitting the difference between the railroad tracks and Somerset, but I think you're going to run into some environmental issues there too.
The closer you get back there, it's going to be the creek.
Yeah, you're going to be right in the creek bed. I think that's going to be limited.
They can't move it much further than
Yeah, I think it's environmentally constrained, otherwise you're going to have the towers actually in the creek bed.
Yeah.
Could you please address the concerns regarding cancer, health risks, EMR, briefly?
EMF, electric and magnetic fields. I guess the first thing that I want to emphasize is electromagnetic fields are everywhere. If you had the appropriate testing device, you would find them in your home. You'd probably never use your electric razor or your hairdryer again. They're a part of life, a very natural part of life, and probably commonly misunderstood. The fields, as I described earlier, diminish rapidly. There's like a bell curve, and those fields fall off rapidly as you approach the edges of the right-of-way, such that in a lot of cases under normal conditions, you can't really pick anything. It's almost indiscernible outside of the right-of-way between what is from the lines versus what is ambient in the environment. There are two different kinds of fields. There are electric fields, and then there are magnetic fields. And they're slightly different. The electric fields can be blocked by a physical object, where the magnetic fields are not. And as far as health concerns, we feel like the best approach is for us to provide information. We do that by offering to come out and take readings and help customers understand the readings, what they mean in context. And then we provide access to what we feel are the most reputable studies on the topic. And one of those was mentioned earlier, the Virginia Department of Health studied this for a long time and ultimately said, there's really no conclusive evidence, and they basically abandoned the study after, I think, 10 years. But all of that information, the links to the studies themselves are available on our website. We've got the World Health Organization, the National Cancer Institute, Virginia Department of Health. We feel that they're the experts, and so we make that information available.
And I'm not qualified to argue that. With a question on notification and who gets notice, it's a linear feet.
Thank you for bringing that back
up. What is it, $250, I think? I don't remember off the top of my head. I know I got notified, but...
Good. And did you get my postcard? Thank you. Good. So what we did was, you have to start somewhere. You have to draw a line somewhere. We felt with the potential for new right-of-way, with a preliminary route, we wanted a multi-prong approach. So we used the center line, and we drew a line 500 feet out on either side of that center line, and we grabbed all the parcel data from within that 1,000-foot wide corridor.
And you're mandated what linear footage? I just want to point out that I think you guys went above and beyond from a statutory standpoint.
And I appreciate you mentioning that. There is no mandate.
There is no mandate on how far you have to go out?
No. Now, once we file the application, there are specific guidelines. As part of that application process, we're required to notify adjacent
certified property, certified mail, and all that wonderful stuff.
That's right. The properties that are crossed. Now, we typically go above and beyond that. But this just to notify folks that we're having the open house. The open house is not mandated. The notification requirements are not mandated. But we used 500 feet on either side. We notified all the properties according to the property records that were on file with the county. So, for example, we notified Somerset Crossing HOA. Unfortunately, the management for the HOA has changed hands apparently multiple times. So we sent it to Cardinal Management, which I guess is no longer, and your website says SFRM or something like that.
Sequoia.
Well, now it's Sequoia, but before it was Service First. Anyway, so we made multiple attempts to notify the HOA, and we did notify all of the Somerset Crossing homes that were in that 500-foot corridor. Now, we did hear from a couple of the residents at Somerset Crossing, and they informed us that there was a meeting that had been planned by the HOA, and they asked us if we could come and present at that meeting. So I reached out to the HOA. I went to the HOA website, and there's no contact information for any of the board of directors or really anyone with the HOA. So I clicked on the link at the bottom that says this website is maintained by, and that's how I found the Service First Management Services or whatever. And they're the ones that told me they no longer had it, that it was Sequoia. So I called Sequoia and reached Monica Ruiz, and she wouldn't give me any of the board members' contact information, but she offered to contact the board to see if we could participate in the meeting with residents. We were told by Monica that we weren't invited, that it was just going to be a discussion amongst the HOA. But Mr. Napoli agreed to meet with us privately, and so we did that. Now, since then, we understand that there's a much larger concern among the folks at Somerset Crossing, and so we've expanded that mailing list. We tried to pick up everybody along that southern border, and we did actually last week. We were back in Somerset Crossing. We took additional photography from different viewpoint locations. We did our best to look at the terrain and pick some of the higher points of view. We actually went in somebody's backyard. We knocked on the door and got her permission. She's at the ridge, just going into Buckland Mills Elementary, up on that ridge there. So we took a shot from her backyard because we really want to see what it's going to look like, and we want to be able to show what it's going to look like if we follow, either of these two alignments along the railroad.
Only two more questions and one comment. My short-term memory is going around. Remediation. Did you say where you're going to buy the environmental credits if you need be? Would those be local or?
A lot of that is dictated by the state agencies. I would love to tell you, and we've talked within the project team.
Your control then?
Well, to some extent. Now, we've talked with Brian Henshaw about the North Fork and some potential stream restoration. We are very open to working with the town to whatever extent possible to improve the situation long term.
I do want to address Ms. Leonard's concerns about the view shed, that sort of thing. I realize that you guys are relatively early in the process and couldn't possibly know everything there is to know about the town and its plans and the various things, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't point a few things out. Yes, the town is a historic district. Is it the equivalent of Buckland Mills? No. But then again, Buckland Mills isn't quite as historic as you're portraying it in terms of land mass. Just something to consider. But I would note this. The proposed route that you guys have, in addition to going through our conservation areas and cutting through our industrial area and impacting a variety of homes, also bisects two of our gateways, which we just spent, I don't want to think about how long, talking about, attempting to revise, debating back and forth, and it's been a subject of some discussion for years. And what the visual impacts of particular types of development are, what the town does or doesn't want at those gateway areas. I mean, it's been talked and beat to death, and I think everybody's sort of come to a mutual position on at least the gateway section of it and what the visual impact is to the town as a quote-unquote historic town. And you want to literally run 110-foot power utility towers right through the gateway.
Can I ask, what are the gateway areas?
The two gateways that you would be directly impacting would be the southern gateway at Old Carolina Road. You'd literally be crossing.
Okay.
You'd be running right through it. Yeah. And then the southwest gateway down by the railroad tracks. I also forgot all about this. I was wondering what the impacts would be on or if you even looked at what the impacts would be on the proposed grade separation and It's a grade separation at that, grade separated at the railroad, grade separated crossing and widening of of Route 15 right where you want to run the lines through, and what the impact is on the current plan that's supposed to begin construction next year for the interchange improvements that impact right where you want to put your towers.
Well, I've heard about the interchange improvements
And they extend all the way to the railroad tracks.
Okay, and then I heard actually from Kate Wyatt with the Journey Through Hallowed Ground that there are ultimate plans to span across the railroad on 15.
That's the grade separation.
That's the grade
And widening.
Okay.
And widening.
And widening 15 right there at the tracks?
Correct.
Who has those plans?
VDOT.
They're not designed. I'm sorry, I'm the town planner and zoning administrator. It's a planned interchange. There's no funding for it. There's no CIP money. It would take right away from the west side and ultimately be a bridge crossing.
Which has been proffered. That property has been proffered for the most, at least on the south side of the tracks.
But in terms of there hasn't been any engineering, it's quite years away, but there's ultimately a plan, or part of the countywide transportation plan to bridge the railroad crossing. That's more of a engineering design.
And just so you're aware, we are actually part of the Hallowed Ground, Journey Through Hallowed
Oh,
Ground.
yeah, it's all of 15.
I mean,
which
actually,
is...
Delegate Marshall has a question. Yep, Delegate Marshall. Oh, Delegate Marshall, I'm sorry.
I did attend the VDOT meeting, and what Bob is talking about going over train tracks was considered a supplement to what they do have the money to do what they want to do up here at 15 and 66.
Yeah.
Lanes.
Yeah.
A little confusing at first when you explain it to me. It seems okay once you grab onto it, but that is kind of a spin-off of what they want to do to enhance the traffic flow.
I think it's better termed Phase 2.
And Old Carolina, that becomes
Old Carolina
Jefferson Street?
Right, yeah, it becomes Jefferson Street,
Okay.
runs right out of here.
Okay. Those are the gateways.
And that covers all of that. I only have one more question. Looking at your plan, and I know I can't pin you down on a date because of all of the various permutations that you're going to have to go through. But you're talking about submitting an application to the SCC in the fall of 2014. It's September.
Yeah. We're looking right now.
Earliest date.
End of November.
Okay.
And subject to change.
And that's all I have. Does anybody have any follow-ups?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a few comments. Sorry, we haven't met yet. I'm town planner. With the government, I'm here to help. We have talked about getting entitlements. There is an entitlement process to bring the lines through town. I haven't really checked with the county yet. You've talked about your plans so preliminarily, so we haven't dug into the minutiae yet.
Before you get into that, I have talked to the county, and they've pushed it off on us.
Okay. Just bringing this on, you can talk about it. In my reading of the ordinance, we only permit transmission lines within our I-1 district, which unfortunately impact Mr. Wolf, who's already left. The R1 district and the R2 district, which would either be a northern route along 66 or the southern route along 66, our ordinances currently don't allow it. The southern route is our conservation district and also our I-1 district. The C1 district doesn't currently permit transmission lines, only our I-1 district lines. So there would be an entitlement process in town, and there would probably need to be some further investigation on our allowances within the ordinances to permit it. So where we would have a preference perhaps for the underground line, we'd have to look at our ordinances to consider that alignment. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does.
So there's some development impediments to some of the scenarios that they're talking about tonight. I think once they flush it out, there's probably a more serious, or not more serious, a more definitive alignment. We would dig into the details about that. But right now, there's some impediments to bring it through the town, as I see it. But I have not told her that. I've not told these guys that. I was simply looking at it this evening while I was in the back. So I can provide you more information to you and to the council as we move forward.
Well, I may be misunderstanding your comments, but the line routing, the approval for the line is under state jurisdiction.
That's what I'm saying. I don't see an entitlement through our current ordinances, but that's just something.
Yeah.
On that note, I do appreciate you coming in. I have one question for the town manager. I haven't listened to the tape, so I don't know. But it's my understanding that the town's legal counsel would like a report from us, or has indicated he would like one. Given that they want to submit, we have to assume worst case scenario for us, that they submit at the end of November. That would require council action if they were going to take a position on this for the SEC, to have a response early November, which means we would have to have something drafted and ready to go in October, which is next month. Go ahead.
Well, and I'll just caveat, because I can see you're kind of working through the timeline. From the SCC's perspective, if you were to submit your comments now or October or even November when we file, they're going to send it back to you and say
It's not timely.
Yeah. So once we file, and you'll know when we file, they will review what we've submitted, and usually it takes 30 to 60 days for them to establish a docket for the case and establish a case number and a hearing examiner and a procedural order. Once they do that, then you and all the property owners will be notified, and then that's when you can submit comments relative to that case number.
I understand that, but I suspect that as an interim step, they're going to want to deliver comments to you before you go to the SEC.
Which is great.
And that's the kind of we'll deal with the SEC comments later, but I'm assuming that they're going to want some sort of recommendation. I just need to know what a timeline is so I can.
Correct, Mr. Chair. What I recommend is basically you'll have heard a lot of information this evening. Obviously,
yeah.
Really, the ideal thing would be for the Planning Commission to forward a recommendation based upon the public input. One of the reasons we set this up was because of the timeline with where the council got a chance to actually hear the first original presentation. We wanted to build some time in to let that digest amongst residents so that then they could come here to give public input. We have received public input, so now if we can, it sounds like we have a little bit more time. I do know that regardless if it's SEC or not, the council would like to make some kind of formal response on what their stance is going to be. And I think a lot of that would probably come at your all's recommendation as well.
All right, I'm going to, if there's no objection, I think probably the best thing to do is just assume the shortest timeline possible. Again, if there's no objection, I will work with Marshawn and try and put together a report, synopsis, interpretation, recommendation of a draft nature, and a draft resolution by the October meeting.
Yeah.
A draft resolution for the council from the Planning Commission by the October meeting, and my wife is going to kill me for committing to this.
Mr. Chair, just to let you know, because of conflicts with VML, that does get pushed off for at least 1 week for you. So we do have a little bit extra time, but it's no consolation.
No, it's not.
No, but 1 week's a little 1 week.
No, so that way we could have something delivered to council by assuming that we can come to an agreement on it at the October meeting, revise the draft. We could have a final draft ready by the November meeting, have a joint public hearing on it prior to the November meeting and to the November council meeting, and pass it, and we'd be done with it. And then it's up to council. So I think, if there's no objection, I think that's the time frame that we're going to operate under. Okay. Without objection? Okay. Sure. Why not?
Has there been any attempt, we heard one resident raise it, and I think we were kind of allude to it in a jokingly manner, but has there been any discussion of a private-public partnership to work through this? It seems to me that you have a township that is looking to make improvements, and in fact is in the midst of making improvements. You have a large corporation, Corporation X we'll call it, although we do know that Amazon has put out requests, they're looking to employ people in this area for a Haymarket facility. At some point,
the grassroots are going to turn their aim not at you, but at the Amazon or the company. And we will do it in a way that doesn't put us legally on the hook for throwing a name out like Amazon. And we will put the pressure on your customer and raise the awareness that your customer is seeking to support, or at least will not come out of the shadows, and is supporting, going through wetlands, putting children's health potentially at risk, lowering property values, all so that they can distribute, whatever it is that they distribute. By the way, I just got a phone call from them, so you guys will be probably seeing that soon. But in any event, has anybody reached out to the corporation? We have had public-private partnerships work in this county before. I can point to a children's youth football facility that was a pro bono client of mine, and that's exactly what we did. We got the county together, we got business together, and we built this beautiful multi-million-dollar field of dreams for the Grizzlies football program. But also now we have soccer playing on it, we have lacrosse playing on it. It's an excellent facility. And I haven't heard that. I mean, what I'm hearing is just Dominion making its proposals. I don't hear anybody talking about how can we work together. Again, as the property owner, at least representative of the property owners, it's a little off-putting, too, that we hear all this conversation like you're just going to waltz in and take our land. I think there has to be better communication. I think there has to be some thought to the potential of a public-private partnership here. We're starting to reach out to our local officials, our state officials, our federal officials. I'll be on the Hill tomorrow. And we're going to put pressure on you. That's no secret. We've already talked about that. But I would like to do it in a way that is constructive. And the biggest pressure I think we can put on you and the county, because I see the county's culpability in this, is to go after the private commercial, your customer, client, whatever we're calling them. We're not doing that right now, but I'm telling you right now, I'm also warning you, that's the next step. And it will be coming. That being said, I'd like to see the discussion. Has that even been had? Has it even, crossed your mind?
I'll spare you the confidentiality, and I'll bail you out on this. As to your concerns about naming the entity, it's actually a public record. Right. If you go in, and I can provide you with the link, if you go into the county's planning database, into their database of where construction permits lie and where final site plan approvals lie and where all that stuff is, there is a reference to the Midwood Center parcel, I think it's Midwood 1. And you can actually pull up the documentation and the notes on how long this has been in process, all your PASA and your final site plan, and it does identify VA Data Inc. as the person that is getting the letter, and VA Data Inc. is a subsidiary of it's actually Amazon VA Data Inc. I think is the actual corporate name
in Virginia. And weren't they the ones that pulled out of Utah? And
was it Oregon or Washington? It's Oregon or Washington. I think there's a facility that's built that's not being used, if I recall correctly. So it is a matter of public records. Now, with regard to working out a public-private partnership, I suspect that one of the reasons that you're not hearing anything about that, or that everybody sort of is in the dark and doesn't know what's going on, is that is intentional. It is intentional, at least to my understanding, from the county side. My understanding is that this is being driven by the county's economic development director, and to some extent even the members of the Board of Supervisors aren't aware of what's going on, and that there is an allowance for that under the economic development provisions of closed session and all that, although I'm kind of curious how the economic development director is driving that outside of the board. Until that, so I have no idea what sort of deal they have worked with Amazon, but I'm sure that there have been negotiations. I have been informed by a quite reliable source within the county government that it does involve the Midwood Center directly. It does involve their lawyers. There has been a variety of back and forth on it. This is not something that just cropped up
Right.
So I would strongly suggest that if you want to pursue that tactic, now at least what's today, the 8th, for the next 10 days and possibly more. I think you guys are actually in the Brentsville Magisterial District. You contact Supervisor Covington. After the 18th, presuming that he gets appointed to the to his judgeship, you might want to talk to the nice, kind woman back there in the green who may or may not be your magisterial supervisor after that point. Or, in the interim, you've always got Corey Stewart to contact, and I suspect Pete Cannon would be more than happy to hear from you, even though you're just across the line.
We have meetings set up.
On that note, since I'm sure that nobody else in here wants to talk about the Haymarket Fairground property or ARB or council updates or our comp plan, I'm going to take a recess for 5 minutes, let everybody handle what they... I know I have something I have to go do, and if I could get everybody, excuse me, if I get everybody to sit down or take it outside, one of the two, so we can wrap up the rest of this stuff. As soon as Josh comes back.
Do we know where he is?
He's in the bathroom.
Oh, okay. We have a quorum.
I'll wait for him. Then they can sit through it. It's like if we're not out of here in 10 minutes, I'd be shocked.
Well, it depends on the update from the...
Okay. I'll call it back to order. If I get everybody to please sit down or take it out into the atrium, please. I will give the perfunctory call for citizens' time. Is there anyone who wishes to address the Planning Commission? Seeing none, I'll close citizens' time. No.
I'll make a motion.
You're not going to get to rattle much.
Well, I was wrong about we may not have jurisdiction.
I don't think we do.
With each other.
They don't care. They're not going to care. They're not going to pay attention to it anyway. We are the town of Haymarket.
That's it.
Our district is defensible.
Yeah, I know.
All right.
It's us.
Well, I'm not going to discuss that tonight.
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from Monday, August 11th, 2014, and to approve the minutes from the work session for Monday, August 18th, 2014.
I second. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Votes unanimous. ARB update. Anything?
We did not meet last month.
Okay, council update. Anything we need to know? I'll take that as a no. Town planner report. Brevity would be appreciated.
Encouraged.
October, you'll be looking at Haymarket self-storage, like the Chick-fil-A.
Okay. Old business.
Spring, turn of the year.
Okay.
Sheets has gone dormant.
Really? Completely? Okay. I'm not surprised. Fairgrounds, I'm assuming we have received no additional input.
They were going to come and also address the council. Given the council's agenda for September, we asked them to move to October.
Without objection, I would direct the clerk to leave it on the old business until such time as we can dispense or dispose of the issue.
The same would be for John Marshall Commons. The council is not pushing that either.
Is that set for next month's agenda? Because they're on a...
Correct. You've already made your recommendation.
They're on an expedited time frame as well. From what I don't believe they've been issued a hearing date yet, but my understanding is that they are trying to leverage an expedited hearing date prior to the end of the year before the Planning Commission.
Last time I spoke with Roy Barnett, they were not scheduled any sooner than November.
Any sooner than November? So this would need to make, assuming that November is the date, this would have to be on the October agenda for council?
Yes.
Okay. Comp plan. Two things. One, do we have the edits yet?
Yes.
Okay. What I would suggest is that, can you deliver the edits electronically?
I can. We were waiting to see whether or not you guys wanted to weigh in on...
Yeah, on this issue.
Yeah.
What I would suggest is that go ahead and deliver the edits to everybody. Go ahead and review the edits at your leisure, because I'm going to move that we discussion on further consideration of the comp plan until such time as Dominion Power presents their recommended route to the State Corporation Commission.
Okay, I second.
Okay, the reason I want to do that, take this under discussion, the reason I want to do that is, depending on which route they choose, whether it runs through the Conservation District, whether it runs through the Gateway issue, whether it runs north side or south side of I-66 or some other unknown, as of yet unknown route, it will dramatically, or it potentially could dramatically impact the development patterns in the town, existing and proposed uses, and rather than have to go back 2 or 3 months after recommending a revised version of the comp plan, then have to go back in and do a comp plan amendment at considerable expense to the town. I don't see that as doing a service to anybody, and that in the best interest of the town, its residents, both from a fiscal standpoint and from a planning standpoint, I suspect the best option is just simply defer it. We've met our statutory mandate by opening the discussion and review period within the required time frame. There is no time frame for completing that review. So from a statutory standpoint, my understanding is that we are fine and could quite literally extend this out indefinitely if need be. So does anybody else have any comments or input? Hearing none, I'd like a roll call vote on the motion to defer.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Discussion items. Anybody have anything else? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Maddox's motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Vote is unanimous. Let's get out of here.